Everybody, I'll call this meeting to order at 10 a.m. Agenda item number 1 will be the pledges. I've asked Commissioner Miller to do the U.S. pledge and Commissioner Wilkinson to do the Texas pledge. In the past, I've asked staff to do the pledges. There is a chance this will be the last commission meeting for Commissioner Wilkinson and Commissioner Miller, and I wanted them to do the pledge. I just want everybody to know what a huge benefit those two commissioners, along with Commissioner Williams, have been to this agency, representing every license holder, doing what we can as a commission to protect the public. This is a voluntary position. There's a lot of hours. And I just want to thank them for taking time away from their schedule, their job, their family, to look out for the best interest of the consumers of Texas. And I want to thank y'all. Hopefully we will see you in February. We might see you in February. But if not, I want to take this opportunity to thank you for your time, your sacrifice, and your commitment to this agency. It is greatly appreciated. Okay. Agenda item number 2, I'd entertain a motion for absence of Commissioner Williams.
So moved.
Motion made by Commissioner Miller, second by Commissioner Woodruff. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Any abstaining? Motion carries. Agenda item number 3, opening remarks. I will be brief, just real quick. You know, we are still really involved with ARELO, which is all the state agencies of all 50 states, including some foreign countries. Virgin Islands were there the last time. And it makes you really proud when you go to those meetings, and we are the star on the mountain. We are the beacon that everybody tries to become. We require more education than anybody. We have more license holders than any state except California and I think Florida. But we go down there and we hear a lot of issues that they have that we have taken care of. We hear a lot of issues that we don't know about yet. And that gives us the ability to bring it back here and for us to start trying to fix it before it actually happens. We've had a busy quarter. We've had selection committees for ESAC. We've had selection committees for the inspectors, broker responsibility working group, broker lawyer, ESAC. We've had a really busy agenda, and that is not only, you know, for the volunteers sitting on those groups, but also for staff, and for all the meetings we've had to get this meeting put together. It's been a really busy quarter, and I just want to thank all the volunteers that serve on those committees, subcommittees, and task forces, and thank staff. And basically, we have a pretty long agenda today. I don't think it's going to be any major issues. I will say when we get to the form adoption, if you listen to Broker Lawyer Committee this last time, I think it was 7.5 hours, something like that. I mean, hundreds of comments. Y'all, that is what we need to provide as a commission. We need to provide guidance, but we need feedback from not only the license holders and the associations that we deal with, but also the public. And we had a lot of comments, and Broker Lawyer did an incredible job putting them together, and we will look at those when they're presented. Okay, and that basically ends my opening remarks. Agenda item number 4, appointments to the Education Standards Advisory Committee. I believe Commissioner Wilkinson, along with Commissioner Williams, Commissioner Miller, sat on that advisory committee to pick them, and I believe Commissioner Wilkinson is going to bring their findings.
As you said, the ESAC committee was made up of Barbara Russell, Commissioner Williams, and myself, and we recommend the following applicants serve on the committee for a term ending in December 2024. Carrie Bang, a license holder member. Candy Lunsman, a license holder member. Ruben Pena, license holder member. Bill Stedman, license holder member. Mike Crowley, education member. And Kalea Youngblood, education member. Thomas Carl Leatherman was recommended as a license holder member to alternate, and Cynthia Bias was recommended as the education member alternate should a vacancy occur. I move that the commission accept the recommendations of the ASAC Selection Committee.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Wilkinson, second by Commissioner Russell. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Any abstaining? Motion carries. Thank you for your time in going through those applicants. Agenda item number 5, appointments to the Texas Real Estate Inspector Committee. Myself, Commissioner Miller, and Commissioner Pena sat on that task force to selection committee, and I would entertain a motion from Commissioner Pena.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes. Mr. Chairman, based on the deliberations on that meeting on September the 21st, we recommend Brian Carroll fill the public member opening with a term ending on December 31st, 2024. Also from that meeting, we selected an alternate, Roland Castillo, and he will be recommended as a public member alternate should a vacancy arise. With that, Mr. Chairman, I move that the commission accepts the recommendations of the Texas Real Estate Inspector Committee.
Do I have a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Pena, second by Commissioner Woodruff. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carries. And that is really strange when you see the name of it. It's the TREC. And they sneak that I in, and you're always like, wait, where did this come from? So, yeah, we might have to rename that or something. Yeah, it's kind of confusing. Okay, I am going to go off the agenda a little bit. Agenda item number 23, we have McConnell Jones to do the presentation for the internal audit for fiscal year 23. I'm going to go ahead and have them present prior to the staff reports. If a page number would be great. Let me look. And is there McConnell Jones? Okay.
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
537, page 537. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay. For the record, my name is Liz Myers with Internal Audit. So your notebooks contain summaries of the material I'll be discussing. First is the FY 2022 Annual Internal Audit Report Summary, and this report is required by the Texas Internal Audit Act, and the State Auditor's Office prescribes the report's content areas. The report summarizes the 2022 internal audit activities and the planned audit activities for FY 2023, and the plan was approved by the Audit Committee. As required, the report was submitted to the Governor's Office, the Legislative Board, and the State Auditor's Office by November 1st. This year, we performed one advisory services and one audit plan, or one audit, excuse me. And the full report and proposed internal audit plan were provided to you earlier by email. The first was the asset management advisory services we performed and provided several recommendations to improve areas covered to meet the state regulations, TREC standard operating procedures, as well as the use of TREC's new fixed asset system. The accounting and finance audit was rated as some improvement needed. TREC's internal controls over the reconciliation and cash forecasting processes observed the primary focus is on reconciling the revenue account. Discrepancies between CAPS and USAS need to be investigated with a CAPS consultant to resolve reconciling items and report issues to the comptroller of the public accounts. Additionally, written policies and procedures needed updating for reconciliations that provide sufficient detail so they can be easily followed. Okay, so also in this is a status report in your materials, and then the final item I have for you is the proposed FY, or now approved, excuse me, FY 23 internal audit plan, and we plan to cover 4 audits this year. First being the Public Funds Investment Act Compliance, or PFIA, the Governance Control Environment, Human Resources, and the IT Systems Deployment. The internal audit plan was provided to you earlier as well. And this is the end of my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will now go into staff reports. We're going to move agenda item number 6 till later when we look at the forms. We'll get the broker lawyer update then. I would like to ask Chair Charles Porter to give an Education Standards Advisory Committee that we sometimes abbreviate as ESAC, which we probably should not do. For those listening, we should probably tell them what some of this, what this alphabet stands for.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief. We met on October 3rd in our normal quarterly meeting. You know, we're in an advisory role to the staff and our wonderful colleagues at TREC, who are just great to work with, in every single one of them. We make advice about way to change the classes and things and update them, and then they review and consider ideas. The Broker Responsibility Working Group recommended that we open the Property Management Qualifying course for a review, which we've done at several meetings. Since commercial property management is not a course topic required, we're modifying the course to kind of eliminate commercial property management, and we're going to consider maybe renaming the course to residential property management, because that's what we cover. We've also discussed making the 30-hour real estate brokerage course, which we talked about before with y'all, a mandatory course, and the TREC staff is now writing a rule for our consideration at our next meeting. That's kind of where we stand. Our next meeting is January 9th, 2023. If there are any other questions, please, I'm happy to answer questions.
Any questions? All right, thank you very much. Next up, I will have Chance Brown, Chair of the Broker Responsibility Working Group. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I feel like I'm going to just repeat Charles, so it's going to be a really short report. We met on October 12th. Our first topic of discussion was the property management discussion that we've been having for the better part of a year and then some. Part of that, as Mr. Porter reported, was asking the Education Standards Advisory Committee to open up the property management class and take a look at what could be done to possibly improve it. The second portion of that was, how do we provide some brokerage accountability for property management? And the general consensus after a significant amount of discussion was that, similar to how we check box now to create a delegated supervisor, there would be a box in the new computer system that we're developing where a broker could check a box and say, this person is allowed to do property management activity on our behalf. Just a little more awareness from the broker of what's going on, but obviously we're some time from that system being up and running and having that kind of capability, so we've left it in the hands of our very capable staff to work on that when the appropriate time comes. The second topic of discussion was the brokerage class and education. There was a discussion about the different types of broker license potential, whether you're a broker who is a solo broker, a broker associate, a sponsoring broker, and should there be any different requirements for those levels of broker. If you're somebody who's going to be sponsoring agents, should you have a different accountability from an education standpoint? And this is going to be an ongoing conversation. It was a conversation that was had in the last Broker Responsibility Working Group, and so we're revisiting a lot of their notes for that. But out of that discussion, number one, we would reinforce ESAC's recommendation that brokerage become a mandatory qualifying class. We would support that. And the second was a motion that broker responsibility course be taken prior to applying for the brokerage exam to get your broker's license. Excuse me. Currently, that is required in the first renewal after, and so it's not really changing the requirement, just moving up the date. And with that, I'll conclude my report. Thank you.
Any questions? I've got one. Just, I love the idea of identifying property managers. I think it's going to have to be vetted, because I know in our office we have people that do just strictly inspections. We have agents that do strictly leasing, and I would not want to label either one of them as a property manager. But so I like the idea, but I think you're right. I think it's going to take a lot of vetting because there's so many different roles in a property manager. And I was told we need to change the name to asset manager. So you might hear me say that, but I like y'all looking at it, but it is going to take a lot of vetting because there's a lot of different parts of a property management company.
You know, one of the things, and Commissioner Miller and I have had this discussion, is from a statutory standpoint, we're constrained by 3 words, which is control of rent. And then you have all these different roles from make-ready to collection to leasing to whatever you want to call it that kind of fall under an umbrella and what's what. So, agreed 100%.
Commissioner Lerner.
I think also in the past, some of us have discussed the broker responsibility course, and he's talking about before you get a broker's license. I think it would be good to explore options of everybody getting broker responsibility.
Agree. And I think we've talked about this in the past to where you get all 3 groups. You get the ESAC, you get the property management, you get broker lawyer working group all together, because it's not just one problem for one of the advisory groups. It's a problem for all of us. So I appreciate y'all cross-pollinating on some of these issues, if we can use that word, because I think that's the only way we're going to get it done. Totally agree.
Our thought on ESAC having brokerage as a required class was just that if we could have that explanation of what a broker-agent relationship looks like prior to somebody entering into one, maybe some people make better decisions.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions? All right. Thank you. General Counsel Vanessa Burgess will give the Texas Real Estate Inspector Committee report.
Good morning, Vanessa Burgess, General Counsel for the record. The Texas Real Estate Inspector Committee met on October the 18th. They discussed quite a few items. First, they discussed a public comment related to walk and talks, which is a practice where an inspector charges a flat fee to a client to provide basic observations of a property within an allotted time period. It's usually about 30 minutes to an hour. And some of you may recall we had an article out about this and that they are prohibited. And the inspector committee had received a comment who disagreed with that position. So the committee met, they all again unanimously agreed and reaffirmed that this type of inspection is not allowed under TREC rules and that it can be subject to a TREC complaint and disciplinary action. The committee also discussed concerns related to inspectors who accept payment at closing for fear that they can sometimes be pressured to produce a favorable report to ensure payment. There's a lot of discussion about this. However, it was ultimately noted that inspectors have to follow the real estate standards the real estate inspector standards of practice already, which would prohibit such an action to make your inspection report contingent, with the hope that it would close. So that altering, feeling a pressure to have it pass inspection based on your payment, that's already prohibited. And so the thought was there was no need to move any further with that discussion because it's already prohibited. Enforcement can already pursue it. And it's just part of the standards that all inspectors are held to. The committee also looked at it's an Inspector Rule 535.223, and you will see it presented later today because the committee voted to recommend it. And the revisions to this rule clarify that when multiple boxes are checked for a particular item on the report form, that the inspector must also explain the reason for checking multiple boxes. So you've got boxes inspected, not inspected, partially inspected. And so if you're going to check more than one of those boxes, that you provide an explanation as to why. And that's just based on some of the scenarios they're seeing out there where folks will check multiple boxes, but it's not clear why. And so the proposed amendments also remove single system inspections from the list of exemptions. So that means that the requirements in 535.223 would also apply to those inspections. Today, later, you will also see a new form before you. So brokers have long had a termination form to inform TREC when a sales agent relationship is terminated. And this proposed new form, it's called the Notice of Apprentice/Real Estate Inspector Termination Form, would be used by inspectors to terminate a trainee or real estate inspector relationship. So it looks very similar to the form that you already have for brokers and agents, just giving the training inspectors a vehicle for which to submit that information to TREC. And then finally, not finally, so the committee took a look at some of the legislative initiatives that TREC has. They agreed with TREC moving forward on the proposed legislation to repeal the Inspector Recovery Fund. So the Inspector Recovery Fund, very similar to what you see with the Real Estate Recovery Fund, though, for inspectors. It's incredibly underutilized in large part due to the requirement that inspectors carry E&O insurance. And the resolution of inspector agents typically, or inspector issues typically go through the E&O insurance. That also has to do a little bit with the dollar thresholds involved and the reality of, litigating the litigation that's required in order to make a recovery fund claim versus going through the E&O insurance. So it does appear that there is a vehicle for consumers who have been harmed to go through that E&O insurance. They're not utilizing the Inspector Recovery Fund. So the committee agreed with that direction of moving forward to repeal. And then finally, the committee had a conversation and ultimately voted 5-3 to proposed to the commission the idea of pre-licensing education related to the standards of practice for apprentice inspectors. So this would require legislative change. It would be an education requirement associated with getting the apprentice license. So I think what that will ultimately look like is a continued discussion with the inspector committee, also with their education subcommittee, to see what that would look like, with a potential recommendation for the 2025 Texas legislative session, just because that would be a pretty significant change in apprentice licensure, and they wanted to really fully vet that before recommending it for this session. And I am available for any questions.
Any questions? All right. Thank you very much. Next up, Executive Director Chelsea Buckholz. Good morning.
Good morning. First off, I had a question about how to jump from agenda item to agenda item on your tablets. So I wanted to just say that you should have a button with 3 horizontal lines in the top left corner of your materials on the tablet. If you click that button, it should get you to a table of contents that will allow you to navigate easily. Took me a while to find that, so I thought you may be in the same boat. Welcome back to Austin for our last meeting of 2022. We're glad to have you. We're covering a lot of information today, of course, as always. I wanted to note that along with our regular staff reports that you'll hear today, just following my report, you are also provided with a year-over-year analysis for each division. So those materials are just behind each staff report as we go through them. So now that the fiscal year is concluded at the end of August, we have that information to be able to provide to you. You'll not be hearing from Tony today because this meeting was scheduled a little bit earlier in the month than is typical for us. He had scheduled a trip a year ago, and so is on that trip that could not be moved. So he has done a lot of preparation, a lot of fretting, and we will cover his areas in his absence. Summer will be handling the legislative update for you tomorrow at the workshop. But if you're wondering where he is, he's on a cruise. And I think we all wish we were with him, maybe, depending on if he comes back sick or not, right? We'll see. I also want to note, speaking of the legislative update, that bill filing starts a week from today. So the legislative session is upon us, and we're ready for it. I also wanted to note that Jen Wheeler is also not with us. She's our Director of Education and Examination Services. In her stead, Mike Sample Deal will be providing that update. So be kind to him, as I know you will. As many of you know, Steve Rapp, our IT director, is retiring at the end of the month. He has served TREC and TALCB extremely well. I have relied on him for far beyond his IT skill set. He's helped me interview for key positions. He's been wise counsel to me and many among us. He's been a voice of reason when we've needed it. He's brought historical knowledge to being one of our longest standing members on our senior team. When he came to the agency, he really created a culture in our IT division that is much healthier. And there's a brightness in people's eyes there that I understand wasn't there before. Besides that, he supported our IT function extremely well, and has done so in a way that he can interpret things to me, who I have no IT background. I really value his expertise. I will personally miss him, and I'm very sad to see him go. But I aspire to be where he is, retiring, and wish him all the best in this next season of life, for which he has worked extremely hard. So I would like for you to just join me in thanking Steve Rapp. I also want to introduce to you our new IT director, who's also with us. Most of you will recognize him. Tom Watson has served TREC for many years in a variety of roles in the IT department. He helped, in fact, lead our last database implementation. So he's got great experience in that regard. He has familiarity of all of our systems and our people. He retired a few months ago, but then applied for that IT director position. And when I announced his return, his phone blew up with congratulations. Nobody is disappointed to see him back. So he will provide great continuity for us in this new database implementation. I'm really excited for him to be a part of the team. Tom, will you just wave your hand and stand? That segues us right into an update on the RAMP project. At the last commission meeting, I told you we are in negotiations for that contract, and you then delegated authority to me to sign that final contract. Well, we continue to negotiate. I didn't expect to still be in this place. It has taken much longer than expected. I get the sense that we are days away from at least knowing our path forward. Our staff has worked extremely diligently in these negotiations, establishing terms and conditions and moving the ball forward. I'm very proud of their work. There is a story to tell on this. It is for another day. So stay tuned on that front, but I believe we are close. Lastly, on behalf of staff, well, not lastly, second to lastly, I'd like to say a special thank you to each of you for the inflation increases that you approved as part of the budget approval at the last commission meeting. Those increases went into effect in October, and that means that at the beginning of this month, November, staff were able to see those increases in their paycheck. This made a huge difference for many, and I'm grateful for your willingness to take care of our people. Of course, they are our richest resource, so thank you for that. And while I'm thanking people, I would like to specifically thank Commissioner Miller, Commissioner Wilkinson, and Commissioner Williams, who's not with us. Their terms expire at the end of January. And while the timing of the governor's appointment process is unknown, I am fearful that I will miss my opportunity to say thank you to each of you for your service. The three of you have really seen and experienced a roller coaster ride that has been our recent history. And you have led our agency with passion and with great engagement. So thank you for your gift of service that you've provided to each of us and to the license holder community. I appreciate you. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that look forward to a great meeting. Anything?
Any questions? All right. Thank you very much. Robert Hood, Director of Customer Relations Division. And while he's coming up, let me add, if there's anybody that would like to make public comment, please sign up at the back. If you're here on one of the contested cases, you do not need to sign up. Anybody else want to make public comment, please sign up at the back and they'll bring it to me. That way we don't miss you. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Robert Hood, Director of Customer Relations Division. I am pleased to present to you on the status of the division. On page 15 in your meeting materials, you will find the Customer Relations Division report. This report will reflect the contact center statistics through September of 2022. In September, all metrics for the division trended in a very positive direction. The call volume for September was a little bit over 14,000 calls, which was about a 14% decrease than the previous month of August. The hold time for September was 31 seconds compared to the 50 seconds in August. 21 staff members were answering phone calls and processing emails in September. As you are aware, we do anticipate some outlier days in which our call volume is above our 2-minute hold time target. But for the month of September, we were successful in maintaining a hold time of less than 2 minutes for the entire month. The September comparison of calls between TREC and the board is consistent at 90% of our calls are TREC related. On page 16 in your materials is our 12-month overview of calls presented to the contact center and the hold times for those respective months. Over the past 10 months, the contact center has consistently been below our 2-minute target hold time, with our shortest hold time of 31 seconds last month in September, and our longest hold time of 2 minutes and 9 seconds in October of 2021. The number of calls presented over these months range from as little as 14,000 calls last month in September and as many as 18,000 calls in March of 2022. Next, on page 17, you will find the number of emails the contact center has handled. In September, 3,373 emails were processed, all within 1 business day of receiving them. On page 18, you'll find our fiscal year comparison of the monthly average number of calls we were presented each fiscal year with the average hold time. Only September of 2022 is represented for fiscal year 2023 with 14,000 calls and a 31-second hold time. On page 19, you'll find the results of our customer satisfaction survey. Most of the customers that choose to complete the survey are contacting us via telephone, and they are more than likely a real estate sales agent. 98% of the customers surveyed rated their telephone experience as above average or excellent. Next, if you scroll or flip to page 26 of your meeting materials, you'll find the Customer Relations Division year-over-year comparison. This page shows the comparison of the number of calls received in the contact center per month over the last 5 years. In 2018, the contact center received over 30,000 calls in some months. This is indicated by the yellow vertical bar on the graph. Since 2018, we have become more efficient in many areas of the agency and reduced the reasons why our customers needed to contact us via telephone. In fiscal year 2022, we averaged about 16,000 calls per month. Next, on page 27, you'll find the average number of calls handled per month per fiscal year and the hold time for the fiscal year. Once again, we've come a long way from the 15-minute hold time in 2018 to a 1.5-minute hold time in FY 2022. And then lastly, on page 28, this is a month-to-month fiscal year comparison of the number of emails the contact center processed. In FY 2018, we did not track the number of emails processed monthly, but in FY 19, some months exceeded 5,000 emails processed. Consistently over FY 2022, we processed about 4,000 emails each month with a response sent in less than 1 business day. This will conclude all the reports for the Customer Relations Division. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Commissioner Hargreaves.
Are you fully staffed in your division right now?
We have 21 representatives answering phone calls and processing emails right now. We have a posting out to hire 3 more.
Okay. Well, outstanding job.
Thank you.
Commissioner Miller.
Director Hood, right? I usually call you Robert. You have done a yeoman's job over the last 6 years that I've been around here. It is unbelievable what you've accomplished, and I know you did a lot of it by yourself. So I thank you very much.
We're fortunate to have some great staff, too. Thank you, though.
You built the staff.
Any other questions or comments? I'll just kudos. I mean, 2018, that was a long time ago. It was a long time ago looking at the hold times, the amount of calls, the emails, the customer satisfaction. Just good job. Your staff, the other parts of the department all working together has certainly turned it around, and we thank you. I get told a lot when I talk to someone about the process of getting a license or renew or whatever. I get a lot of positive things about the entire organization, and answering the phone is the biggest one. So thank you for that.
Good to hear. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I believe Mr. Dill is going to give the Education and Examination Services.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Kessner and Commissioners. I'm Mike Sample Dill, Program Manager for the Education and Examinations Division. I'm presenting to you today on behalf of Jennifer Wheeler. This morning, I'd like to provide you with a high-level summary of what occurred in the Education Division over the course of fiscal year 2022. In fiscal 2022, the Education Division processed the highest volume of CE providers, qualifying courses, and continuing education courses compared to the last 4 fiscal years. We currently have 41 qualifying education providers, 24 colleges, and 2 high schools offering qualifying real estate courses. Likewise, we have 526 approved CE providers and more than 4,000 CE courses available. Of note, in the fiscal year look back is the approximate 25% increase in CE course applications this fiscal year versus the fiscal year 2021. The volume of CE providers approved this fiscal year is about 9% above these approved last year, which is likely a contributing factor in the increase in course applications. The increased utilization of tools such as Zoom and providers developing contract courses may also contribute to the increase in course volume, and staff will continue to monitor and look for trends in these areas. Excuse me. As you know, the easement and right-of-way education program becomes effective on January the 1st. This program is a result of House Bill 2730 enacted by the 87th Legislature and requires new ERW applications to complete 16 hours of approved qualifying education. The law also requires existing ERW registrants to complete 16 hours of continuing education within each 2-year renewal cycle. All database programming requirements have been completed and are ready to implement this requirement. The posting system has also been updated to allow for real-time posting of ERW continuing education by education providers, and a search feature has also been added to the website's course search to filter for ERW education. Moving on to Pearson VUE and exam administrations. In fiscal year 2022, Pearson VUE administered 46,436 sales agent exams, which is a decrease of only 347 exams from the previous fiscal year, which saw at that time a 48% jump. This data supports the upward trend in total license holders as reported by the licensing division. There were 2,362 broker exams administered, which is an increase of 245 or 9% over the last year. The first-time pass rates for sales agents in fiscal year 2022 was 60% and 61% for brokers. This is a slight increase over the last fiscal year when the first-time pass rate for sales agents and brokers was 57% and 59% respectively. Finally, I'd like to provide you with an update on the progress of the audit and compliance program. Since its inception, staff had conducted 381 CE provider website compliance reviews and 77 qualifying education provider website reviews. We have also completed 18 qualifying provider administrative audits with another 14 in progress. A total of 26 staff-initiated complaints were submitted to enforcement. Most complaints are a result of education providers offering courses after a course had expired and when a course renewal application had not been submitted. This concludes the education fiscal year review. The monthly and fiscal year end reports are included in your materials, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? I've got one question. The Executive Director Buckholt said to be nice, so you can just leave this for Jennifer when she gets back if you would like.
I'll make a note.
Okay. The 46,000 exams for licensees and 2,300 exams for brokers, correct?
Yes.
In the last fiscal year. Of the 40% that did not pass it the first time, is there any way to drill down and look at that 40%? Because it passed the first time, you passed the national and the state. Is there a way to drill down, and of those 40%, how many of them passed one or the other, either the state or the national? And then how many of those ended up passing the other part the second time? I'm just curious on that 40%, how many of them passed at least one part of it, then passed the other the second time?
Oh, certainly, we can get you that information. Obviously, I don't have it with me today, but that is something that we can obtain.
Because I know when I took both of them, I was a little bit nervous. Yeah, and they gave me the P and I left before they changed their mind. So, yeah, I'd just be interesting to know where that 40%'s at.
Okay, sure, certainly.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Director of Licensing, Denise Sample. We do not have to be nice to her, is that correct? Okay.
But I hope you are. Good morning, Chair Kestner and Commissioners. I'm Denise Sample, Director of Licensing, for the record. And I'm presenting to you the regular monthly reports with the data as of September, which is the first month of the fiscal year we're currently in. So if you go to page 38 of your materials, I'll give you a little sneak preview of the year-over-year comparison in that top left corner, of that page shows the number of applications received across all license types, and that's a fiscal year comparison from 18 to 22. And so you'll see we had a 7% dip in the total number of applications, but when we compare it to fiscal year 20, we're still just under 30% more applications than, to finish out fiscal year 22. So plenty of applications to go around, which you'll see kind of leads to some of the other numbers that impact license holder counts and renewal rates. So on this page, if you go to the top right, you'll see broker and sales agent applications received, and this is the data as of September of 22 and a comparison of last September. We're only 1 month into the fiscal year data. So we do continue to see lower number of applications received for sales agents. They're our largest license holder population, so they're kind of what drive the total numbers. You'll also notice in the bottom right corner, the ERW applications, we've seen them skyrocket. They're still small as far as the share of applications that we receive, but this is expected ahead of the requirements changing January 1st, where they'll have to take education in order to obtain an ERW registration or to renew it. And so this is what we always see ahead of requirements changing. Everybody gets their application in before that deadline. So the inspector applications are also holding steady. Again, just 1 month of data, but if we move on to the next page, we've got the license renewal activity reports, and you can see there that We've got a higher number of licenses renewing in the top left of brokers and sales agents, but the renewal rates are holding steady. And we'll continue to monitor that. Let's see. The next page has the license holder counts. And we did see in the month of September, for the first time in a very long time, a slight decrease in the total number of license holders, representing about 221 total license holders. But I was able to pull up data for October, and we more than made up for that decrease. We have an increase over September. We ended October with about 1,500 more total license holders. So our ending number in October was 234,328. The next report shows a graphical presentation of each license type and the license holder counts. And you'll see we're noticing that uptick in the ERW registrants as well. That number had historically been decreasing, and we expect it to increase until we get to January 1. We'll continue monitoring. The next page is the license application processing time. I do want to point out the efforts of the licensing team. In the last 3 reporting months, we've maintained a processing time of less than, double digits, single digits, in processing every application type. This is due to the cross-training efforts that have been happening in the licensing division to allow anyone to pivot and process any kind of application that we may see come our way. So I want to give them some kudos on that processing. The next report on page 44, this is where we get our year-over-year comparison. So you'll see this is the license holder counts going back to fiscal year 2001. And I continually, each year when I prepare this report, I mark the most recent fiscal year as the new peak. And that's been the trend since 2012. The next report is fiscal year data 2016 through 22 renewal rates, and the alternating colors represent every other year because the licenses renew on a 2-year cycle. So the rates, the numbers continue to grow as the license holder population grows, but the rates more or less hold steady. I'm happy to answer any questions about those reports.
Any questions or comments? Okay, I guess I'm the only one that brought comments today. On page...
Scott, I have Commissioner.
Oh, Commissioner Woodruff, I'm sorry.
I have one comment. I think it's going to be interesting over the next 12 months to watch, the new applicants, coming in, that number, because, economic conditions being what they are in the housing market, et cetera. I think that'll be a number that very likely will decline over some period of time, although it'll be interesting to watch that.
And this data is prepared monthly, so we'll continue monitoring it and presenting. And anytime you need additional information, we can see what we can find.
Yeah, it's a little early to tell, but
Right.
it'll be interesting, as we move through 2023 to see directionally what's going on there. So anyway, nice job though. You all do good work. Thank you.
So one of the things that I've been looking at is the ever increasing rate of membership, right? And kind of looking at for the plateau to come with respect to new licensees, but we also have consideration of the retention of the licensees as the markets, begin to cool down. The Fed raised the interest rates last week again, and I believe there's another interest rate increase coming again soon. And so kind of the overall environment of the licensees and the new entrants, as well as the retentions of the ones that came in this huge increase, sharp increase of memberships. And we're paying close attention to that, as well as what the potential effects are on our budgeting and our operational objectives as well. So very, very interesting times for sure.
Just to kind of follow up those two, on the broker count on the licensee count on page 40, we used to break out the broker entity licenses, and in our local market, we're seeing a lot of broker entity license under one DR. I'd like to maybe have that broke out again so we can kind of see the increase in it. And I wish everybody would look on page, 42. The sales agent processing time is 3.78 days. Y'all, that is, you turn it in on Monday, Friday, you're scheduling the test. That is incredible. There's not another state in the nation that can talk about that. And so, I mean, kudos. I mean, that's under 4 days. That's just unheard of. So, and I know it's your department, but I know it also has to do with Steve's department, the education department, everybody together. But kudos for that. That is just phenomenal. That is just unbelievable. So everybody deserves a hand on that. So give them a hand, all right? That's just incredible.
Yeah, I would say that if you go back, and we were talking about, 4 years ago as an example, and you think about the efficiency that's been accomplished, and as a practitioner, the amount of conversation we would have in our company about the challenges there, which has gone to zero during that period of time. I mean, it speaks to the, what you've accomplished. So congratulations, and I obviously a team effort, because we see that in the customer service numbers. I mean, there's reasons why those inquiries are down, I think, too. So anyway, congratulations.
And I wanted to just make one comment to Commissioner Pena. We are working with the education team and the IT team to make renewing as seamless as possible. And so we're especially excited about, a new licensing system to make that even easier for us to retain the license holder counts that we've got. So that's definitely on our radar as well.
And I think the processing time for renewals is probably figured in the hours, because we'll have agents turn it in on Monday afternoon, and then Monday night they get their license in the email. It's almost automatic. So it's definitely streamlined.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Director of Enforcement, Michael Malloy, will be next. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Kestner. Commissioners, Michael Malloy, Director of Enforcement, for the record. On the first report, it's the E1 report. It's on page 47 of your materials. Reflects that the first month of our fiscal year was a busy month. We opened 567 cases and closed 558. It looks like reported over the last fiscal year, there's been an overall decline in our fitness determinations and the application inquiries, which is the background history stuff. It seems to have been somewhat got to a regular average that we can predict. So we'll continue to monitor that. Moving on to the case aging report on page 48. I'm happy to report that it reflects 99% of complaints are less than a year old. The percentage of complaints within the 6 to 12 month time frame is under 20%. And you'll note that there are 3 cases that are over 30 months. Those cases are on the agenda for later on, stemming from a SOA PFD. The cases within 12 to 18 months range are either set for SOA, pending a decision by the commission, or at a settlement stage via an agreed order. Since we're on the topic of aging, I wanted to turn to the next page, on page 49. This is a report that previously I don't think you've seen. And this gives you a breakdown between September, where we were September 2021 and where we are today. The blue bar represents the case aging as of 2021 within that 0 to 6 months, and the green with September 2022. I'm happy to report that that's improved 13% in the past year. And as I just mentioned, also, if you look at the 6 to 12 month period, we're now at a low of 19% of open cases that are within that time range. I want to thank, I just want to highlight these improvements over the past year, since we're tackling our case aging. And I wanted to thank the enforcement staff for their hard work for this past year. I will continue to report our progress at every meeting. As you recall, the Commission approved as part of the 2023 budget some additional staffing to help with case aging. There's 2 positions allocated for each the investigator, legal assistant, and attorney positions. Happy to report that we have filled the those positions for the attorney position and the investigator positions, and we're currently searching for the 2 legal assistant positions. I hope to get those filled by the end of the calendar year. Excuse me. So turning to the subject category on 1551, there wasn't really any significant changes since I last reported this report. And I would like to move to my fiscal year 2022 wrap-up report. So we finished the year strong, closing 666,698 cases. That was 240 more cases than we opened. And if you look at the next page, the 5-year comparison, you'll notice that there was an overall dip in the cases received. Most of that was in the fitness determination and the application inquiry, because we've just seen no overall decline in those from previous fiscal years. However, I will note that the openings for the broker sales complaints is at a 5-year high. I would suspect that's probably because our increase in license counts will reflect those overall general increase of complaints in that area. This concludes my reports. Are there any questions?
Commissioner Hargreaves.
How long does it typically take something to move through the SOA process on average?
It varies. If someone wants to postpone the process and ask for resets, like the ones, the 3 that are they're over 30 months old, we had to deal with pandemic-related delays, but also I believe the respondent got 3 resets. So often that
so
they won't reset it.
That's not the normal.
Yeah, SOA judges are usually very generous, especially if you're pro se, on giving resets, or often they'll say, I'm going to go hire a lawyer. So it's hard to say. I mean, the earlier we can get it, so the more we can shorten down the overall case aging, the sooner we can get some of those cases set for SOA. But because if a case just goes straight, like you set it, for today, and you have that hearing, the judge has 60 days to decide on their decision. Once that comes back, there's also a period where you can file, basically a kind of appeal to the judge. The judge doesn't have a time limit to respond to those. And then, of course, there's, depending on where the commission meets, that's why sometimes it takes, 6 months to get some of these resolved or longer.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? All right, thank you very much. Next up, Director of IT, Steve Rapp.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning and congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All of us are jealous of that R word.
You should be. I'm going to be doing a lot of exciting things. Having a lot of fun. Good morning to you all, Director of Information Technology, Steve Rapp. It's a pleasure to be here before you today. As you recall, the IT report presented today shows website utilization and the percentage of our applications, renewals, and transactions that occurred online for the month of September 2022. This includes a comparison to the prior fiscal year to date as well. Today, I will also be presenting a year-over-year comparison for fiscal years 21 and 22. On page 1 of my report, as you can see, web traffic continues to show a slight decline from this time last year. Online activity for initial applications, renewals, and sponsorship transactions have remained consistent with previous months and the prior fiscal year. Page 2 is a 13-month graphical representation of the data presented. The next page presents a comparison of fiscal year 22 to 21. Compares utilizations of online renewal rates. Here you'll see that the FY22 web traffic shows a nominal decline from that of the previous fiscal year. You'll also see online renewal rates for fiscal year 22 are almost identical to that of fiscal year 21. And that concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions? All right, thank you very much. Oh, hold on. Commissioner Miller.
Director Rapp, Steve, to me, again, thank you for the changes that I've seen in the 6 years that I've been here. You've made a great improvement.
Thank you.
Keep it going. I mean, you can't, but hand over those
You're
reins.
in great hands.
Yeah.
It's set up to succeed, for sure.
Like earlier, thank you for everything. It's a totally different agency.
Thank
Leaders like you. All right, thank you. All right. Chief Financial Officer, Renata Williams. I think we need to find the 2% who did not renew online and see if they still have dial-up. I'm just amazed that 2% still do it the old-fashioned way. You know. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Kestner and Commissioners. Renata Williams, Chief Financial Officer. I will be presenting the staff reports for the Financial Services Division for the month of September, as well as our fiscal year 2022 closeout reports. Beginning on page 61, you will find our quarterly budget analysis. This is data through September 30th, and we've collected $1.1 million, which is 8% of our targeted revenue collection, and we are currently on target. Moving to page 62, this is the quarterly expense analysis. So again, this data is through September 30th, and we've had expenditures of $1,030,576, which is 5% of our projected expenditure target. We're slightly below the target of 8.3 of budgeted expenditures, but keep in mind this is only after 1 month. Okay, moving on to page 63. This is the operating activity comparison for the month of September. In regards to our revenue, looking at last year and this year, our revenue collection didn't actually fluctuate too much and was $1.1 million for both years. Our expenditures, however, did increase slightly in September. I will continue to show our year-over-year comparison as we progress throughout the year. Next are our holding reports. The TREC operating account 3055 had one U.S. Treasury note that matured. Funds were reinvested. The total portfolio balance was approximately $21.7 million. We have $9.7 million set aside for operational reserves, which leaves us with an ending balance of $11.9 million available for operations. On page 65, the real estate recovery account 3058. That also had one U.S. Treasury note that matured and was reinvested. The portfolio balance was $4.3 million. We have $567,934.34 reserved for potential payments within the next 90 days, which leaves $3.8 million as the remaining balance. This fund is fully capable of meeting all its known obligations. On page 66, the real estate inspection recovery account 3059. It has a balance of $609,404.10 and no pending payments. Since the balance is over $600,000, we'll be required to transfer any amount in excess of this by December 31st to the state treasury. I'm projecting that we will transfer approximately $10,000 to the general revenue fund. And now on page 67, we will begin the FY22 closeout report review. This review is structured to give you an update for our Q4 of fiscal year 2022, as well as a complete look back for FY22 revenue and expenditures. On page 68 is the quarterly revenue analysis. We projected to collect $3.7 million, but we actually collected $3.9 for the quarter. Overall, actual revenue collection was $14.8 million. And this was actually $57,984 more than what we projected. And so I'm really pleased to see that our revenue projections were closer to what our actual collection was, and changing our methodology to a 3-year weighted average has significantly improved our forecasting. On page 69, it breaks down the difference and variance for each revenue category, so you can see how we performed in each. And as always, our license fees are our biggest driver for revenue, making up 91% of our revenue collection. On page 70 is our quarterly expenditure analysis. We projected to expend $4.3 million in Q4, but we only had expenditures of $4.1 million. Overall, for the year, we budgeted expenditures at $17 million, but actual expenditures were $14.4 million. And now on page 71, this is going to break down the difference and variance for each of those expenditure categories so you can see how we performed in each. The category that affected our expenditures the most was our professional fees and services. This is the category where we had budgeted expenditures for the ramp project. But due to the length of the contracting process for this major procurement, we did not have those expenditures as we thought we would. So that left quite a bit as unexpended, We also had increases in other categories, such as the other operating expenses, our statewide cost allocation plan, and our DPS expenditures. Those other operating expenses were related to the purchasing of computer equipment instead of leasing. The SWICAP amount, it fluctuates and is an amount provided by the Comptroller's Office. And DPS was a little late in submitting their billing to us, and as they were reconciling, realized that they hadn't billed us for several months of searches, so that's why we saw a spike in that. On page 72 are snippets from our revenue dashboard. Each tile will show you our actual revenue collection, our budgeted amount that we thought we would collect for each category, last year's actual collection, and a year-over-year percentage of change. On page 73, you will find the snippets from our expenditure dashboard for each category. I know it's a lot of information, but in an effort to maintain transparency and consistency, the same information that was presented for the revenue is presented for the expenditures. Each tile shows you the actual expenditures, the budgeted expenditures, last year's actual expense in a particular category, and a year-over-year a year-over-year percentage of change. There's an increase in just about every category as our spending in FY21 was significantly less due to the agency still navigating through the effects of COVID-19 in our operating activity. So for instance, we had an increase in FTEs approved in FY22, so that affected our personnel costs. We had increased travel due to in-person meetings and in-person conferences, increase in operating expenses due to purchasing laptops instead of leasing laptops. So I think next year's comparison will be a better comparison for apples to apples. On page 74 is a monthly graphical representation of a year-over-year comparison of revenue and expenditures. So you can see for each month, for FY21 and FY22, how much revenue we collected and how much our expenditures were. On page 75, this shows you our 5-year trend data. This gives you the actual revenue and expenditures from FY 2018 through 2022. It also shows you what our approved budget is for FY 23 and the proposed budgets for 24 and 25. Lastly, we go into our holding reports, which is basically our ending balance in each of the portfolios that I mentioned before, and it's comprised of cash and U.S. Treasury notes. In accounts 3055, which is our TREC operating account, our ending balance was $22.7 million, and we had 8.1 in operating reserves, and that left us with 14.6 available for operations as of August 31st. On page 77, in account 3058, we had 4.3 as our ending balance. 4.3 million as our ending balance, 470,000 reserved for potential payments, which left 3.8 as the available balance. Page 78 shows you payment history of the Real Estate Recovery Fund. Here you will see data such as the amount of the claim payments, repayments received, admin penalties received, and the number of claims paid per year. Finally, on page 79 is account 3059. Our ending balance was $609,000. There are no potential payments within 90 days, and there's also a chart to the right that shows payment history, and you will see our last payment out of this fund was in fiscal year 2017. This concludes the Financial Services Division report. If there are no questions, I will be followed by our Government and Strategic Communications Director, Summer Mandel.
Any questions? Just comment, Commissioner Pena.
Thank you for the reports. They're a work of art, really. I enjoy reading all the financial information. It's presented very clearly and concise and easy to understand. So kudos for you and the team. Thank you so much.
It's a team effort. Thank you.
I love the reports. Some of the colors are hard for someone my age, but other than that, they're awesome.
Thank you, sir. We can take
Love them.
I can make this.
Yeah, they're excellent. They give it a lot deeper dive and into and also the change in the budgeting methodology. It makes it a lot more realistic in terms of these variances and that sort of thing. So thank you for that.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Educate me, what is a click-through rate?
That's for Summer Mandel on the communications. I think we're a little too far on the slides.
All right. We'll have Summer address that.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I guess Summer Mandel,
Okay.
Government and Strategic Communications Director. Good morning.
Commissioner Russell, hopefully I'll answer your question in my little spiel here, but if not, we'll come back to it.
I got ahead of myself.
It's such an exciting report. So good morning, Commissioners, Chair Kesner. I'm Summer Mandel, Government and Strategic Communications Director. It's my pleasure to give you an update today on the agency's communications efforts. So today's report shows you the increase in followers on our social media accounts since my first report to you in February. And the greatest growth has been, as you can see, on LinkedIn and Twitter. And just as a reminder, the Instagram account at Texas Real Estate Commission was new in February, so there's nothing to compare it to. Largely, these are organic followers, which means it's people who have found us because of posts in their social feeds or because someone has shared something from the commission. But they may also have come to us through a new standardized email signature that staff's been using for the past couple of months. That includes icons and links to our social media handles. You'll also see those stats on newsletter open and click-through rates. So these are unique opens and unique click-throughs, which means the user's actions are counted just one time, even if they open something more than once or click on something more than once. So the average email open rate across industries is around 21%, and the average click-through rate is 2.62%. So you can see we're surpassing those averages. So open rate, again, is just the percentage among all recipients who have opened an email at least once, and then click-through rate is the percentage of clicks on any links in those emails. Does that help clear that up a little? Commissioner Russell? Okay, we can go deeper in a minute. So finally, I just want to give you a brief overview of my overall communication strategy and how it's different than what you may be used to from TREC in the past. So in my experience, the only way to be really successful at communications is to listen first. So that's listening on social media, seeing what people are talking about, or license holders' questions they have. It's listening to the media. What are they reporting on? Lately, it's been home builders, HOAs, that kind of stuff. And it's also looking at the analytics that we have available to us. So Google Analytics, or these analytics you see here, where we can see what kind of actions people take and what they're interested in reading. So another priority for my communications is to anticipate the questions or points of confusion that license holders or the public might have about some of our work, especially the rules and laws that we implement. And that typically, for me, means writing and designing things with that in mind, and being transparent and using plain language. And also, sometimes it means explaining things that we don't regulate, like home builders or HOAs. So in addition to thinking about the person who may know the least, we also have to anticipate that there are some who are very invested in the work of the commission and, want to do deeper dives. So we shared more than the basics by, for example, maybe there's a bill we're saying passed during the 87th legislature, then we have a link to that bill so people who want to go and actually read the text of that and see what it says have the opportunity to do that. And it's just a cleaner way than maybe footnotes like our attorneys love, but they don't pressure me to do, which is really nice. So as much as possible, I also like to encourage my colleagues to think beyond prioritizing what they think or want people to know. It's not about us, it's about the audience and what they want to know. And we need to do this because we earn people's follows, we earn their eyeballs on our stuff, and we can't abuse that just by putting out whatever we think they want to know. So you might be wondering what this means for practical output. So I will highlight emails as an example. So in 2021, there were a lot more emails sent from GovDelivery, which is our email marketing tool. But when I examined the content of those emails, it was pretty clear that it was duplicative and not really audience specific. And when you look at the open rates, those analytics, and the click-throughs, they were pretty stagnant and below those industry standards. So for me, rather than focusing on the quantity of emails, I'm really looking at the quality of what's inside of the emails. And that includes targeted info for specific audiences. It means sending emails only when we have useful information. People are just inundated with communications from all over the place. So rather than add to that, I want it to stand out as something that's going to be useful with clear takeaways. And so it's a pretty different strategy, having those fewer emails. However, I think that looking at these open rates, I think it's a pretty successful way to go. And so that concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Commissioner Lerner.
Summer, you're doing a great job. I just wanted to kind of figure out what are the priorities going forward in the next year. I know social media is awesome, but there's a lot of people that aren't on social media. So how are we going to touch those people with educational videos, maybe contract forms, what's the right thing to do or not to do? Or just, I know Texas Realtors does a great job of it. Maybe we can piggyback with them or work in conjunction or with our local boards and see what we can do to get the information across. Mm-hmm. Because I think people would open the emails if they're creative and fun and not just all text about a meeting or whatever else it may be.
Yeah, and I think that's what's happening. So as you can see, 55% of recipients to Education Connection open up that email. So and because there's information that's new, as far as like multimedia stuff, I know that's something that you've brought up before, and really this time since I started in January has just been to kind of understand the scope of what we have been doing, what we haven't been doing, what works, what hits. So I think it's kind of just been a runway year for me, and so looking to next year, there will be more of that going on, but it's mostly just getting oriented and knowing the basics. And I would say that kind of stuff is kind of the next level up for me to do, but definitely intend to. And yeah, leveraging the connections that we have to get the word out, that's something that is on the radar as well.
I think partnering with local boards and Texas Realtors is a great way to get the word out. Yeah, I think they can really help.
Yeah, and I think that one thing we need to remember too that I'm thinking about with our communications is when TREC says something, people listen and they cite it and they remember it and they use it to explain to other people what's right or wrong or what have you. And so that's another reason why I'm trying to be very strategic about the communications that we do, because we actually have a very powerful position in the community. So I want to make sure that we're not confusing anyone or, it's clear. And but yes, I think that partnering and doing more together will be great.
I'd like to point out one number. The Education Connection, talking about ERW course applications, ESAC meeting group, had a 55% open rate. Y'all, TREC Advisor, that all of us open to see, whose name is there, and comments on forums, only had a 50% open rate. That right there shows me you're targeting the right group. I mean, when you have a higher percentage of open rate on the Education Connection versus the TREC Advisor with comments on the adopted proposed forums, I think that's huge. So congratulations. That's a big number.
Thank you. Thanks.
So thank you.
I was checking the Inspector Insight that I sent last week, and it was like 58 or 59%, which is incredible for the open rate. So
congrats. Great job.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right.
All right.
Very good. Agenda item number 11, report by the Executive Committee. That is in your handout, page 83 and 85. I'll just highlight, usually when we meet, we talk about staff positions, open staff positions that aren't filled. Usually try to dig down a little bit and kind of find out, where we're losing staff and how we're losing it. Also talk about hybrid work, working hybrid. Also talked about budget and the importance of working a budget to keep them. Also, we talk about, the comments about and the concerns about associated brokers, who they're responsible for and who looks over them. And we'll talk about that more tomorrow. That is going to be given to a group to dissect and break down and investigate. Talk about enforcement, the 6 positions that we need to be filled for enforcement to make sure we have a 80% within 6 months is a huge number. But, can that be 85 or 90? We talk about, the legislative issues coming up, the recovery fund. Those funds were set in 1992. $50,000 in 1992 is different than $50,000 in 2022. Talk about different trends that are hitting. The 40-year listing agreement that we first heard about Arello, and some of us have seen it in our local markets now. So all the notes are there. And if there's a specific issue that you want to bring up, we will certainly talk about it executive. Then executive finds out which group, either ESAC or Broker Responsibly Working Group or whoever, needs to take this and run. Might be the inspectors or whatever audit committee. So, we used to do this once a quarter. Now we're doing it almost monthly. A lot of times it's only 45 minutes to an hour, but I think it's important for the executive committee to get together and kind of keep a pulse on what's going on. Anyway, those are in your handouts on page 83 and 85. I'll be glad to answer any questions. If there are none, next I'll have the audit committee, Commissioner Pena. And I want to thank you for taking the lead in this and really, I think a lot of the good things with the audit and the budget is you also reaching out to staff and getting a working relationship with them. So thank you for that.
Certainly. Mr. Chairman, we met on October the 5th, Commissioner Miller and myself and Board Member McNally for the Internal Audit Committee. We did discuss 3 items which related mostly to the procurement of our internal auditors for the coming year, FY 2023, and also as well as the audit plan for FY 2023 and the most recent plan that audit that was completed, FY 22, which were both presented earlier. For the most part on the upcoming FY 2023 plan, we did give some feedback. We offered some suggestions as reallocation of available resources towards the audit plan. Overall, I think we came to the consensus based on the risk assessment of the areas identified and concluded the meeting, and I think we have a good internal audit program coming up for FY 2023. And that was that. If anybody has any questions.
Questions for the audit committee? All right. Next up, report by Enforcement Committee, Commissioner Miller.
The Enforcement Committee, the minutes are on page 93 that you can see, but it was, Commissioner Lerner brought it to our attention that from Arello and from other things that she's read, that we may not be handling the anonymity issues like we should in enforcement. I know that was one of the commands from the Sunset Commission. So we are going to be looking into that more in detail, and the standardization of penalties and comparing that with the Texas Department of Licensing and another commission. So we will be looking at that and examining it more closely tomorrow in workshop, I believe.
Any comments or questions? Agenda item number 14 is public comments. I have not received any. We're going to go to agenda item number 15, contested cases. Before we do, we're going to take a very short 5-minute break. Probably be 10 minutes, but try to get back in 5. And so we will go on break at 11:25 a.m. Back in session at 11:38 a.m. We're on agenda item number 15. These are the contested cases. Let me kind of go over an outline of how we will handle this. We will announce the case. We will ask if anyone's here to speak on behalf of the respondent. If they are, Director of Enforcement, Mr. Malloy, will go first. And then the person here representing the respondent will speak. They will have 5 minutes each. 5 minutes each. They may want to readdress. If they do, we will certainly give them that opportunity. Any argument, any questions will be limited to the evidence that was part of the PFD, or any new evidence that was reasonably available at the time. We'll call on the commissioners to ask questions. Questions will be limited to the record. And afterwards, we will go into executive session. And then we will come back after executive session and probably have some more questions and some more deliberations, and we'll vote on motions. Okay? I've asked Commissioner Miller to help me with a stopwatch. And so we will start with agenda item 15A, consideration and possible action regarding proposal for the decision in the matter of SOA docket number 329-22217T2172 REC Chandra Nunn versus TREC. Is there anyone here to speak on, and I believe this is on page 97 of your handout. Is there anyone here for Chandra Nunn? Okay. Please come up, state your name. I'm sorry. Michael Malloy first. I'm sorry. I just said that. Okay. Director Malloy.
He gets 5 minutes too.
Yes. And again, 5 minutes.
Okay. Yes, sir. Good morning. Michael Malloy, Director of Enforcement. In this matter, Ms. Nunn was seeking a sales agent license and had the burden of proof. Her application was denied on the basis of her criminal history. The applicant was found guilty of the offenses of conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud, conspiracy to defraud the United States and to pay healthcare kickbacks, and 3 counts of payment and receipt of healthcare kickbacks, aiding and abetting. She was sentenced to 54 months in federal prison and assessed a restitution in the amount of $1.88 million, which is still unpaid. The facts of the criminal offense showed that she had a scheme basically to defraud Medicaid funds from the United States government. The ALJ used the Chapter 53 factors when weighing the determination. The offenses were committed over a period of time. They did end in December of 2011. At that time, she was 32 years old. The judge determined that this was not a youthful indiscretion. And further, she's on continued supervised release until April of 2024. Ms. Nunn provided insufficient mitigating evidence that the judge then applied to the factors and determined she failed to meet her burden of proof. Staff recommends adoption of this PFD with the recommendation that Ms. Nunn's application for sales agent license be denied. And the attorney that handled the matter here is today available for follow-up questions.
All right.
turn it
Any
over.
questions for Mr. Malloy? All right. Thank you very much. There is someone here to speak for Chandra Nunn, correct? Please come forward. Please state your name and we'll limit it to 5 minutes.
Okay, good morning. My name is Chandra Nunn. I'm here because I was denied to receive my real estate license due to a company that I worked for back in 2010. I was indicted at 31 years old for a conspiracy role, which I did go to trial for, and I was found guilty at trial with the group setting. I tried to separate myself from the indictment and was unable to do so at that time in Houston, Texas. Since then, the information that was provided, that was required from me with the Texas Real Estate Commission, I provided to the attorney. And my reason for being here today is because I received documentation back in August informing me that I was denied from a 3-4 ruling. When I looked at the 4 different criteria that I was denied for, 2 of them did not pertain to me. I was not required to receive rehabilitation, nor were any of my references prior to my indictment or conviction or after that I've worked in the real estate industry were contacted or notified or anything to speak on my behalf, and I provided several documentation. I brought that up to the attorney and Texas Real Estate Commission that yes, what you see on paper is different from what you see as myself, and people who can speak to my character and what I went through at that time versus who I am now was not taken into consideration. So that was my reason for asking to come before you guys today, is that the information that was provided to show the things that they ruled against me did not even pertain to me. Yes, that happened to me before. Yes, I did have to serve time for something I did not plead guilty to, because I still stand on my not guilty verdict. But at this time, I have requested my license, and I just ask that all documentation, everything that I submitted be reviewed and not just be a decision made biased.
Okay. Any questions? Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, we will go into executive session. Talk. Oh, Director Malloy. A rebuttal? Okay. We'll go into executive session on that one when we get to the others. The next is agenda item 15B, consideration of possible action regarding proposal for decision in the matter of SOA docket number 329220334, REC TREC versus Demetria Ann Rutherford. I understand there is someone to speak for Rutherford. Is that?
I don't think there's.
Okay.
Sorry.
Director Malloy.
So we don't often have these, but this is a substantive case stemming from 4 complaints that are filed against Ms. Rutherford. And like I mentioned earlier, these are 3 of the ones that are over the 30 days, or 30 months, excuse me. The commission had the burden of proof, and if you read the PFD, I mean, it's a large PFD. I think in the heart of these cases is the association of the respondent with unlicensed persons and unlicensed business entities, namely Mr. Reed and DMR Properties. And their scheme was basically to use these unlicensed entities and individuals working for them to refer to the respondent unqualified tenants, whom they would recruit through advertising and other means. The respondent, as an agent, would send falsified or fraudulent credit reports or other reports to property managers and agents. And these individuals assumed the reports were accurate since they were coming from an agent. The respondent utilized that inherent trust with the person that they're a licensed fiduciary. As you can see in the PFD, in all cases they were fraudulent. The PFD unpacks the extent of the fraudulent activity, the dishonesty and the deception in each one of these cases. And the judge took all that evidence into consideration and came back with a very hefty $47,750 administrative penalty and recommendation to revoke Ms. Rutherford. So staff recommends the adoption of this PFD. The recommendation that the respondent sales agent's license be revoked and should be assessed the administrative penalty in the amount of $48,750. The attorney that handled this matter is here today. I'm also available for questions.
Any questions? Okay. Thank you very much. Next will be agenda item 15C, consideration and possible action regarding proposal for decision in the matter of SOA docket number 329222183, REC TREC versus Lionel Amaya. Anybody here for Mr. Amaya? Okay. Mr. Malloy?
This is another denial, and Mr. Amaya had the burden of proof in this matter. Mr. Amaya was a former license holder. His license expired in 2017. On May 2nd, 2017, Mr. Amaya pled guilty to the first-degree felony offense of aggravated assault with family violence, serious bodily injury, and a deadly weapon. The facts of this offense dealt with him spraying alcohol on the victim and lighting that person on fire. He was only released from community supervision in February of 2022, and additionally, as part of our review of his application, we asked about employment. It was discovered that he was performing unlicensed brokerage activity. He was an independent contractor for a custom home builder. He was not a W-2 employee, which would allow that activity to be exempt under the License Act. The ALJ concluded that based upon Mr. Amaya's need, the ALJ determined that he was conducting brokerage activity, and by doing so, it tended to demonstrate a lack of his requisite honesty, trustworthiness, and integrity. The judge additionally concluded that due to his prior licensure and education, he probably should have known that he was conducting unlicensed brokerage activity. I will comment that work history is usually a very positive mitigating factor for applicants. In this circumstance, it was the opposite. And the judge noted that. Overall, the judge felt he didn't meet his burden of proof due to his criminal history and this unlicensed activity, and recommended denial of his application. Therefore, staff recommends adoption of the PFD with recommendation that Mr. Amaya's application for sales agent license be denied. The attorney that handled the matter is available for questions.
Any questions? Seeing none. Okay. We will go to agenda item number 15D. That is in consideration and possible action regarding proposal for decision in the matter of SOA docket numbers 329203070 REC, 329203071 REC, and 3292037 REC TREC versus Landon Burke, Abby Holiday Real Estate, and Betty Misko. I do understand there is someone here to speak for the respondent. Before Director Malloy or the respondent speaks, General Counsel Burgess is going to kind of give us a recap on where we're at and how we got here.
Sure. Good morning. I'm going to provide a summary of the case and a procedural history, just as a little bit of a refresher on this case. So Landon Burke was a licensed real estate sales agent. His sponsoring broker, Ebby Holiday Incorporated, and the designated broker for Ebby Holiday is Betty Misko. So sales agent Burke represented the buyer in the purchase of her first home. On July 14th of 17, the buyer entered into a contract to purchase a property. The transaction was scheduled to close on August 15th of 17, but during the buyer's final walkthrough of the property on August 13th, the buyer became concerned about foundation issues. Due to these concerns, respondent Burke arranged for the foundation company, Cornerstone Foundation Repair, to evaluate the property on August 15th. On that date, Cornerstone inspected the property and gave a verbal quote of $8,000 for installation of a French drainage system. It is disputed whether this verbal quote also included an estimate of $10,000 for excavation of excess dirt. The parties renegotiated the contract terms, and the seller agreed to a $4,000 concession. The closing date was rescheduled to the following day, August 16th of 2017. At 4:40 p.m. on August 15th, 2017, Cornerstone emailed a written estimate of $11,125 for installation of a French drainage system and $9,000 for excavation of excess dirt. Respondent Burke did not forward the email to the buyer prior to closing, which occurred as scheduled at approximately 8 a.m. on August 16th of 17. As a result, staff has alleged that Burke acted negligently and that Ebby Holliday and Betty Misko failed to properly supervise sales agent Burke. Staff sought to impose administrative penalties. In the original PFD, which is what's before you today, the ALJ recommended no disciplinary action be taken against the respondents. And in terms of procedural history, the Commission first heard this contested case in November of 2020. At that time, the Commission decided to modify the order and impose administrative penalties against all three respondents. The respondents appealed that decision in District Court, and the District Court remanded the case back to the Commission to fix technical issues with the final order.
Okay, Director Malloy. He'll start his time. 5 minutes.
All right, yes, sir. Good morning again. Director of Enforcement Michael Malloy. I'd like to thank General Counsel Vanessa Burgess for setting up what procedurally happened and the facts, and now providing the arguments to show that ALJ erred in his determination in this matter, and the evidence that supports amending the findings of facts and conclusions of law in this PFD because he failed to properly apply interpret the applicable law. First, in the PFD, the judge incorrectly found that Landon Burke did not act negligently. Mr. Burke did not inform his client of the pertinent email that he received the day before closing. The client was already concerned about the foundation issues with the home. The day before closing, a foundation company came to the property and gave a verbal quote for repairs. The company then emailed Burke the written quote that was higher than the verbal quote. The judge in this PFD seems to trivialize the difference between the oral and written quote. The fact is, Mr. Burke's client closed on the property only having knowledge of the lower written quote, or the lower oral quote, excuse me. The fact is, the client closed on the property, the buyer was a first-time home buyer who relied on Burke and his expertise. Pursuant to Commission Rule 535-156C, the license holder has an affirmative duty to keep the principal informed at all times of significant information applicable to the transaction or transactions in which the license holder is acting for their client. As I just mentioned a moment ago, the client closed on the property only having the lower verbal estimate. The evidence shows that Mr. Burke knew the foundation issue was already a major deciding factor for her, and the buyer testified that she would not have proceeded to closing on the property if she had known about the information in the email. The argument from the respondents is that Mr. Burke is excused from forwarding the email because he was not expecting any communication. However, the evidence shows Mr. Burke scheduled the inspection, and he also testified that the foundation company told him they would email some kind of report. Those additional facts contradict the arguments from the respondents, I believe. Sales agents and brokers are held to a higher standard due to them being a fiduciary. Being a fiduciary is a relationship that sets it apart from a lot of professions in the world. The Commission Rule 531.2 talks about fidelity and states that it's a license holder's primary duty to represent the interests of their client, and additionally, they need to be scrupulous and meticulous in performing those functions. Mr. Burke knew how important these foundation issues were for his client and was told by the foundation company they would email a report. So taking into consideration that Mr. Burke is a fiduciary and considering the requirements under Rule 535-156C in this situation, my contention that Mr. Burke had the affirmative duty to keep the principal informed of all times of significant information. Any information about a foundation of a home the buyer's about to purchase is significant and has a significant impact on their decision-making to sell it later, to live there, the ability to even do future repairs if necessary. The reasons are many. So therefore, staff recommends the commission amend the PFD appropriately to reflect the ALJ failed to properly apply, to interpret the applicable law, and that Mr. Burke was negligent in failing to forward the email he received the day before closing in violation of Texas Occupations Code 1101-652B1, and assess administrative penalty in the amount of $3,250. So after establishing that Mr. Burke is negligent, we must review the actions of the sponsoring broker, Ebony Holiday, and then designated broker, Betty Mitsko. Staff contends the ALJ failed to properly apply, interpret the applicable law, finding Ebby Holiday and Betty Mitsko did not fail to properly supervise Mr. Burke. The ALJ justifies the decision that there was nothing that Holiday or Mitsko could have done between the time the email was received and the following morning when the closing occurred. I argue there was things that they could have put in place and done properly to supervise Mr. Burke. Holiday and Mitsko should have had policies and procedures in place to ensure that license holders monitor their emails and other communications leading up to a closing, specifically in cases where they contain significant information.
Your 5 minutes is getting close.
All right.
Please.
We've already established Mr. Burke was one of the scheduled appointments, and I'd just like to point out that the license holders are in constant communications with their clients. I read a report recently where you check our phones over 100 times a day. Therefore, I believe the evidence shows that neither Holiday or Mitsko had the expectation, since they had the expectation that a license holder shouldn't monitor them, it's in contrary to Commission Rule 535-156C, which requires the license holder to keep their principal informed at all times. This is a failure by Mitsko to have significant policies and procedures to supervise their agents. Therefore, staff recommends the Commission to amend the PFD to appropriately reflect the ALJ failed to properly apply and interpret the law, finding Holiday and Mitsko failed to properly supervise Burke in violation of 535.2A and assess the appropriate administrative penalties. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Director Malloy? Commissioner Pena?
Director Malloy, who initiated the complaint in this matter?
Buyer.
The buyer? And so when I read the documentation, it mentions an $8,000 fee estimate for the repair of the foundation and also a $10,000 fee for the dirt removal, right? And for a total of $18,000, correct? Yes?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so was the buyer aware that, I'm getting confused because they actually agreed to split 4,000 and 4,000, right? And so
4,000.
if they were going to split the cost halfway, why was it not 9,000 for the $18,000 total estimate?
My understanding is they talk about the verbal estimate only dealt with the French drain system, where it didn't include the additional amount regarding the foundation.
So was the buyer aware that the total to repair the foundation and their concerns that it was going to be $18,000?
Can you repeat your question?
Was the buyer aware that the total fee estimate to repair the foundation going to be $18,000?
There was a verbal estimate of $18,000.
Was
the difference between that?
Was the buyer aware that that was the fee total, $18,000?
It was an oral quote given at the time.
I might be able to jump in here a little bit. So this was one of these areas where there was a bit of a dispute. Staff submitted proof of one issue, and then the respondent submitted proof of the other. The ALJ ultimately agreed with the respondents, but where the contention is that our position was that the buyer was aware of the $8,000, but not the $10,000 additional repair. But the ALJ found that the buyer was aware of both, even though the buyer and our staff argued that it was just the $8,000 repair.
Okay, so they were aware of the. Now, was that pre-closing or post-closing? The additional 10.
Well, so that's again where the issue kind of splits between what staff argued and what the respondents argued. But staff's position was that she knew about the $8,000. It was the $10,000 that she didn't learn about until later. But the ALJ ultimately found that she was aware of both pre-closing.
Okay. So that's an established fact, that she was aware that the total was going to be
It's what the ALJ found,
18,000.
yeah.
And so post-closing, well, the night before of the closing, he gets an email which goes unopened until October, I believe this is what he said.
Correct.
And it's $2,000 more, right? And so in my assessment of the matters, we're here for a price difference of $2,000 of that repair cost. And you mentioned substantially different, and to me, a $2,000 difference is really not. So if she was aware of that it was $18,000 going in, she actually agreed to split the cost of $4 between the seller, then I'm at a loss with respect to the materiality of the actual written estimate and what the verbal was agreed upon. And so,
Yeah, she contended otherwise, that she didn't have that information from the oral. I mean, like I said, the ALJ found otherwise.
Okay.
I just needed a little bit of are you done?
Yes.
Okay. So this was all done after the termination option period. The sellers agreed to do this out of the kindness of their heart the day before closing. Is that correct?
I think so, yes. Go back and check.
So they weren't even obligated to do it.
I don't know if that was part of the record that focused on the issues.
It was. Okay. I've got some questions, but I'd like to hear from the respondent's attorney prior to my questions, because she might answer part of them. Any other questions? And we'll have Director Malloy come back up after the respondent. Okay. Please state your name. And I've got a timer here. We went a little over 5 minutes, so I won't be a stickler on the 5.
Yes, hello. My name is Elizabeth Brab, and I served as appellate counsel for respondents when this matter was up on administrative appeal in the 201st Judicial District Court. And I believe it was correctly explained that this was remanded back here to the commission to repair, if possible, a fatal error to the final order that was previously issued. Our position remains consistent over these past 2 years, that the ALJ's proposal for decision, its findings of fact and conclusion of law were correct, thoroughly reasoned, and should be adopted as is. In the end, this case, as many do, turns on the credibility of the witnesses and the testimony given. In the ALJ's proposal for decision, it was very clear Mr. Burke's testimony was found, quote, credible, but Ms. Manor-Collins, the home buyer, her testimony was found, quote, disingenuous. Well, the commission is permitted to alter findings of facts and conclusions of law pursuant to improper application or interpretation of the law and technical errors. Judgment calls weighing the credibility of witnesses is the purview of the administrative law judge. Disagreement with the administrative law judge's findings and conclusions does not provide the commission the authority or discretion to ignore their delegated duty and substitute its own findings in place of the neutral fact finder. Much of what the questions you were asking, they're all disputed testimony. Mr. Burke and the foundation repair company representative testified that they provided the $18,000, that the $18,000 estimate was the one verbally given. Further, the statement of the facts that it was Mr. Burke that arranged the foundation estimate was disputed by Mr. Burke. He did not expect to receive an email because he did not arrange the estimate. So I understand that we're talking about an email arriving at 4:40 in the afternoon, evening before a closing, that he didn't expect to receive. And in the end, as you mentioned, we're talking about a difference between the $18,000 verbal estimate and the written estimate of about $2,000, which is part of the reason, as the administrative law judge explained, why it seemed disingenuous to state that this was such a substantial issue and would have caused the buyer to renege on the whole deal when the total home value was $465,000, I believe. So in the end, the Texas Supreme Court in Montgomery Independent School District v. Davis in 2000 explained pretty clearly why having an administrative law judge look at the facts and decide credibility issues is so important to the integrity of these proceedings. Quote, if a board or commission could find additional facts resolving conflicts in the evidence and credibility disputes, it would then be serving as its own fact finder despite delegating the fact finding role to a hearing examiner. And the process of using an independent fact finder would be meaningless. An independent fact finder is integral to the structure of the hearing examiner process. In the end, this case comes down to credibility assessments, the testimony on both sides contradictory, and the administrative law judge thoroughly reasoned his findings in his proposal for decision, and we just ask that the commission accept it as is. Thank you. Any questions?
Any questions? I've got a couple.
You go first.
There is a class that we must take every 2 years to renew our license called Legal 2. And the first 3 pages on that talks about the word fiduciary and talks about your interest, the client's interest above yours. It talks about being meticulous and scrupulous. And when the ALJ judge said they found nothing negligent or incompetent, I'm not sure where you put meticulous and scrupulous in. Is it negligent or incompetent? But as a practicing broker, if we do a walkthrough the day before a closing and there's an issue, we're on high alert. As a matter of fact, I'm at that closing even asking, did you get an email? Did you get something written? And maybe the AL judge thought one was more credible than the other. I don't care how much the house was. It goes back to meticulous and scrupulous. And I think there was major failure on that. When you do a walkthrough, there's an issue, there's an amendment signed, there's got to be credit at closing, and then you fail to open an email and then don't open it for days and days afterwards. That to me, I don't know if it's negligent or incompetent, but it's certainly not scrupulous and meticulous. And I think that's where, as a commission, you have a first-time home buyer, second-time home buyer, whatever, they rely on us to protect the interest. And I think that's where the commission came from, is the ALJ missed incompetent and negligent. And as far as who they remain credible or not credible, it's really irrelevant. The agent dropped the ball. The broker can have policy saying you should have family time, you should have time off. Totally agree with that. But ultimately, you have a fiduciary to that transaction. And this is where that consumer was not protected. I don't care if it's $1.50 or $2,000, they were not given material information because the person failed to be scrupulous and meticulous. And if it wasn't that important, it wouldn't be in every Legal 2 update we have to take every 2 years, the very first part of the class. And I think that's where the commission came from when they looked at this case.
Can I add?
Yes.
Also, in addition to what Scott just said, it's broker responsibility, and I have had total respect for Ebby Halliday and Betty Misko most of my 54 years of real estate in Dallas, Texas. However, to make the excuse that you have have to respect your agent life balance, not when they've got a closing the next morning. Sorry. And I talked to many of our top people to say, would you be watching if you had a closing at 8 o'clock the next morning? And they all said, definitely. But I knew that after being around for 54 years. The broker is responsible for stuff. And over $2,000 or over $200,000, if it's only $2,000, why go through all this appellate court stuff to prove the innocence over $2,000? I don't understand it.
Commissioner Lerner?
I obviously hadn't seen all the paperwork in this transaction. Was there an amendment for this to be done during the termination option period, or did this just come out?
I believe the PFD talks about they agreed prior to the day before closing or a couple days before closing to split the cost.
No, but there wasn't anything from an inspection report that was discussed about the foundation in an amendment.
Nothing in the PFD that I'm aware of. It was through a buyer's walkthrough. You walk through the property, you're going to close, they signed the walkthrough, accepted as is, chose to inspect whatever, broken window, did the amendment, fixed the broken window. As an agent, I mean, none of us walk on water, but as an agent, scrupulous and meticulous would be to see if that broken window was fixed. Our arrangements had been made to have it fixed, and that's where this one missed. And I don't look at the broker, I don't look at the agent, I look at the act. And I'm just wondering, would you not think it meticulous would be checking email before you go to close on a transaction representing your client? Would that be part of meticulous to check email?
Well, what I can state is that Mr. Burke believed that everything was wrapped up. The buyer was aware of previous foundation issues, became nervous at the time, did not want to have a full inspection, and so arranged for a foundation repair company to show up and give an estimate. She arranged that. That's what Mr. Burke testified to, and the foundation company did as well. Now, granted, the buyer says, this is where we get into the conflicts between the testimony. But regardless, a company showed up, assessed the scene, in front of Mr. Burke and the buyer, said the oral estimate, $18,000. A discussion was had with the sellers. They agreed to knock off $4,000. And I believe Mr. Burke thought everything was ready to go and the closing was happening the next day. There was not an issue that the foundation was going to be repaired beforehand, that ever the work was, no assignment was made. It's not like a handshake deal happened to sign up this company to repair the foundation. It was an estimate given based on a walkthrough. It was not a broken window that would need to be repaired for the health and safety of the individuals inside. It was I'm a little concerned, here's what it could be.
Was the estimate not given in two different parts? $8,000 for the repair, $9,000 for dirt removal or whatever. Wasn't it given in two different pieces?
It was kind of broken up as to, like, I believe.
One was 8,000, one was 9. Ended up being like 9 and 11 or something like that. And
something regarding, yes, okay, $8,000 for installation of a French drain and $10,000 for excavation of excess dirt.
Right.
And based on that information, the buyer renegotiated the contract terms and the seller agreed to a $4,000 concession.
And did Burke testify that the purchaser arranged the oral inspection, oral estimate? I thought he stated someone related to him had a contact. I thought the PFD said something maybe.
And only one foundation.
His wife made arrangements or knew someone?
She wanted an engineer to inspect the foundation, was unwilling to pay for the cost of an engineer, and decided to get a free inspection from a foundation repair company. They were available for an inspection that day before, August 15th. I
thought somewhere in the PFD, someone related.
In my memory, one of the other details were that no IABS was shown in the beginning. I understand they did find some in previous files that he had presented it at some point or another. But also, when only one foundation company was ever contacted instead of normal procedures that we've been taught for years, is you get 3 estimates or 3 companies recommended, or you get in trouble.
Okay.
I have a question. Were these defects in the seller's disclosure, were they disclosed initially? Foundation, nothing?
It's not.
It's not, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Woodruff, I'm sorry.
So who were the recipients of this email? I'm sure this is in the record, but, you know, obviously Burke, but were there other recipients of this last, you know, late email?
Honestly, I don't know.
So there was a meeting of the minds with respect to the concession relating to the foundation, right?
That would be my understanding.
Based on whatever contractual agreement they had going into the closing the following day. In other words, it was a settled matter at that point
I believe so, yes.
regarding the foundation.
Well, regarding that,
She agreed for a $4,000 concession
Yes.
to address the foundation issue going into closing.
yes, that's my understanding, yes.
On the eve of the closing at 4 o'clock, they get an email that says it's going to be $2,000 higher, right? That went
$2,000-ish more than the $18,000.
that
oral.
went unopened until October, right? Per the PFD, I think that's what I read. And so, Mr. Chairman, I think he was meticulous enough to ensure that the buyer was happy with respect to the transaction and getting a $4,000 concession. I don't see how not opening an email until several weeks later would show that he's not meticulous. In fact, he did address the issue of the concern of the foundation prior to closing, and she agreed to it. That's just how I see it, and I'm having a hard time holding the broker responsibility for something that no one knew had come up. First of all, that no one knew was out there because someone didn't check their email, and secondly, because the amount is so marginal with respect to the entire transaction. I just don't see it. I think we've allocated more resources to this than the actual difference between the estimate, the oral and written estimate.
Way more.
I tend to agree, but according to the testimony we just heard, the purchaser went in there believing the total cost was $8,000. And the ALJ judge believed the respondent that no, they did understand it was $17,000. If the client, the purchaser, the fiduciary went in there believing it was $8,000 and he would have opened that email and said, no, the $8,000 was only for the French drain, did not include the $10,000 dirt work, that might have totally changed the transaction going from see, that's where the problem is. The buyer testified it was $8,000 and the AL judge found, well, no, you misunderstood. It was $8,000 for this and $10,000 for this. If the email would have been open, perhaps everything would have been known at the day of closing. That's where I have the word meticulous and scrupulous. Because if it's a verbal quote, sometimes you hear 8,000, you might not think of anything else and miss the other 10. And so anyway, that's where I'm kind of coming from. I'm not worried about the amount. I'm worried that I think the agent failed to protect the interest of the client. Bottom line. Broker responsibility or not, you can't supervise every transaction, but you owe fiduciary to that client. And as a practicing broker, it's going to happen. We're going to miss something.
What's
but
the
when
buyer's
you do,
responsibility, though? As a buyer, I would go, hey, did you receive that quote, or can you explain this to me? So there's also buyer responsibility.
But that's right, but that's not at issue in this, right?
Right. The ALJ found they did not act negligent or incompetent, and I think that's where we're at. And IBS, I think, is important, but that's not the big thing here to me. Other questions, comments? We thank you for your time. I'm going to have Director Malloy come up, answer any questions. We will go into executive session. We will come back and probably have some more conversation. Okay? Thank you. Director Malloy?
So just point out that, in the PFD and the facts, it establishes that Mr. Burke set up the foundation. So that's established. At closing, if something like this pops up, right before closing and walkthrough, you see cracks. That's an immediate red flag. And it's in the record that they were going to send a report. If Mr. Burke's the one that set it up like this is in the PFD, logically he's going to be the only one going to get it. Or at least he's going to be one of the persons that gets it. So you should be checking at least at closing, did you get the report they were going to send to email you? I know we're talking about nominal amounts of money, but $2,000 can mean a lot to a lot of people, and I don't think we should trivialize the amount of it or splice it there, in my opinion, because the buyer testified that she would not have closed if she had this information. So clearly the $2,000 was something, important to her. So.
Questions? Commissioner Woodruff.
So with respect to the broker responsibility and the designated broker responsibility, it's the position that there should have been a policy that says you have to check email, that would be the level of expectation, that a broker should have a policy that in their policy manual that says to their sales associates, remember to check email before closing, or daily or hourly, or
I think if they're aware that something significant has occurred within a short period of time right before closing, they should be monitoring their email to provide that information as soon as possible to their client.
so, but and would that be something that you would expect to have in all broker policies, that something around that kind of communication?
Ideally, yes. Or at least some sort of training. Be aware of those.
Can you clarify that question?
Those are best practices, and you're not going to find those in the rules or the.
Right. I guess that's
those are best practice that every reasonable, prudent fiduciary would have in performing their duties to their client.
Okay.
As Chairman Kessler said, things happen, things fall through the cracks. I'm just having a hard time why we're all here for the second and third time to deliberate something that was so minuscule. I'm sorry. I don't see any egregious or even it fell through the cracks, and so that's my point.
Commissioner Withers, I'm sorry. Can you repeat what your question was? I heard Mr. Malloy say that it should be contained in
I
manual.
guess the question is, what's from a broker responsibility standpoint, where, and to the point of what should be considered. How much detail do you need in a policy manual when you're dealing with a licensed professional that has accepted the responsibility in the sense of being a fiduciary, et cetera? Do you have to, and have that kind of education? Do you have to say, hey, and remember to return your phone calls and check your email? I guess to me that is a little hard, because you would assume that, as a licensed professional, that would be a standard of care. If that's it, then I guess we're going to have some pretty specific policies on a lot of things that probably.
So, right now it stands that a broker is supposed to get back to an agent within 3 days. No, we haven't changed it.
We changed,
Oh, it
broker was
changed.
changed to 2 days.
It
2
was?
years ago. The agent
Oh.
is the one trying to change.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. And so Mr. Malloy's saying that it needs to be included that they be meticulous about looking at their email all the time? Is that what you're saying?
Before closing, yes.
Okay.
But
Especially if they're aware of an issue that is of, significance.
I mean, I think every policy and procedure manual talks about following the statute. And the statute, the canon of ethics, fidelity, integrity, and competency, the first three. And so, I mean, I don't think we have to define meticulous and scrupulous to the agents. I think best practices and mentoring and that does it. But I do want to, you mentioned the PFD does say Burke arranged for Cornerstone Foundation to evaluate the property. That was in the PFD.
Yes, sir.
Just, okay. All right, any other questions? Okay, it is 12:27. We are going to go into executive session. I am going to be totally honest. We will be back here in an hour and a half at 2 o'clock. Hopefully. We are adjourned at 12:28 p.m. Meeting back to order at 1:58 p.m. We are returning from executive session where we sought advice from legal counsel and talked about any pending litigation under Government Code 551.071. I'm going to go back to agenda item 15. I would like to start with agenda item 15D, SOA docket number 329203070, REC 329203071, RECN 329203072, REC TREC versus Landon Burke, A.B. Holiday, and Betty Misko. I want to go there because their representative is still here, so I'd like to go to there. I will open it up for if the commissioners have any other questions for either council or entertain a motion on 15D.
Mr. Chairman, I motion that we move to adopt the PFD as written.
I have a motion from Commissioner Pena to adopt the PFD as written.
Second.
I have a second from Commissioner Hartgraves. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman, based on the documentation that I have read, I do believe that the agent and the broker were competent and that they were not negligent with respect to this transaction. I do believe that they did exercise sufficient due care in bringing the buyer and the seller to agree on a concession for the foundation repairs. The fact that the estimate was slightly, the actual written estimate was different by a marginal amount was, I don't think that it is materially different. And so certainly the best practices were not followed with respect to an agent being available as quickly, and that email did come and was not seen. I don't think that holding to account the agent, the broker agency, and the broker representative over a best practices. So I'm having a little hard time trying to have an enforcement action on the difference between the estimate, the verbal estimate, and the written estimate. So I must admit that I do agree with the administrative law judge's ruling on this, and that's why I'm moving to adopt the PFD as written.
Well, we have a motion and a second. Other discussion?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilkinson?
You know, throughout this, and this has been a hard case, I've known, we all that have been in the business for a while have such respect for Abby Holiday and all that she has represented, all she's done for the industry, and overall I've known many of her staff members who are excellent. But then as a commissioner hat goes on me, I keep saying, what are we here for? We're here to protect the consumer, and this was a first-time home buyer. And we as brokers are responsible for our agents. That's just fact. And I know that Abby and her manager, I thought through the process, okay, this could happen to any broker. However, I would have been meeting with the buyers. I would have been sitting down and saying, what does this take? The buyer was nervous. They're first-time home buyers. And the thing that stood out to me most was Abby and the manager, they talked about the work-life balance position, that the agent needed a life, or needed outside of work. And man, I've been in this business since I think 1973, and my last project, I didn't take a day off in 5 years, for example. You were on call night and day. That's just fact. That's what we do as realtors. And especially with a first-time home, you hold their hand as a first-time home buyer. And so my position is, it's really tough for me to go against a wonderful, wonderful company. It's tough for me to go against a manager, because this could happen to any of us, but golly, the agent truly, truly was negligent, in my opinion.
Any other discussion? Commissioner Miller.
I can second everything that Commissioner Wilkinson said, but as brokers, we are charged to be responsible for our agents and everything they do. And I can't tell you how many times, if this had come up in our own company, in my own company, we would just have paid the price, figured out what was wrong, taken care of it in-house, so that there never would have been a TREC complaint sent here. But then again, back to what Dolores said, to make an excuse of life balance when you've got a closing for a brand new buyer, first-time home buyer, there's no excuse for it, in my opinion.
Any other discussion? Commissioner Woodruff?
Yes. I feel like the agent was negligent based on, practice, but also, the fiduciary relationship that they had with the buyer, and particularly given the fact that it was first-time buyer and recognizing even additional needs that a first-time buyer would have. I struggle a little bit with the broker. There's no question, as brokers, we're responsible for the actions of our agents. In this case, notwithstanding the rationale that I understand was there, I do think that it would be very difficult to have a policy that policy needs to go to the point that really, as a licensed professional, as realtors are, and they are schooled in the idea that they need to be meticulous and attentive and timely and all that. I don't know that a policy needs to be established that says read your email, or answer the phone or whatever. But at the end of the day, we do have responsibility for the actions of our agents. And while I have a hard time seeing the broker being the root cause here in terms of the negligence, I do see that by statute, as brokers, we are responsible for the actions of our agents.
I will speak against the motion just based on what I said earlier about meticulous and scrupulous, but also on page 232 of the PFD, it's clearly that Burke arranged for Cornerstone Foundation Repair to evaluate the property. He made the arrangements. If he did not want the report, I think he should have made arrangements there. I can certainly understand where the broker policy was they do not expect people to check emails and have a balance of life. But if you're in this business, I think we have a very unique approach to business. If we meet expectations, we're average. You have to exceed expectations. And when you have a consumer, and I think there's a difference between being in the industry and not being in the industry. We return phone calls at 9 o'clock at night. 12 p.m. You're always on the phone, always checking emails. And I'll ask anybody here, have you checked emails on a holiday or a Saturday or Sunday? And especially if you have a closing. I have no problem with the broker having policy and procedures. They have their expectations, but that agent failed. Now, could the broker or manager supervise every transaction? Absolutely not. But the buck has to stop somewhere, and it stops with broker supervision. And the agent failed. The agent failed to protect the fiduciary of the client, period. It was testified earlier that it was a verbal 8,000, 10,000. Maybe the consumer really understood 8, did not see the other 10. We do not know. But the fact is, if they would have checked the email, it would have been there. And they could have signed at closing, either signing for $18,000, $19,000, or $20,000 or walking away. The buyer did not have that option to and if any agent ever comes before us on a verbal contract and expects us to hold them to a verbal contract, then we're missing our call as an agent. I mean, we just are. So I will speak against the motion to let everybody off with nothing, because this consumer was not protected, and that's our duty, is protect the consumer. Other discussion?
Well said.
Okay, do you want to repeat your motion?
I move to adopt the PFD as written. Well, you already have a first and second. So
Right, I know. So they can vote. The motion was to adopt the PFD as written. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Let's poll the commissioners. Okay.
Commissioner Woodruff?
Nay.
Commissioner Wilkinson?
Nay.
Commissioner Russell?
No.
Commissioner Hargraves?
Aye.
Commissioner Miller?
No.
Commissioner Lerner?
Aye.
Commissioner Pena?
Aye for the motion.
And Chair Kessler?
No. Motion fails 8-3. Okay, more discussion? Questions? Entertain another motion?
I will. I believe that all three respondents should be reprimanded and that Mr. Burke should be assessed an administrative penalty of $3,250, that Ebby Halliday Real Estate, Inc. should be assessed an admin penalty of $2,500, and that Betty Misko should be assessed an administrative penalty of $1,750. So I move that the commission modify the findings of fact and conclusions of law as follows. The commission strikes finding of fact number 28 as listed in the proposal for decision and replaces it with the following. Number 28, Respondent Burke acted negligently by not forwarding the email he received from Cornerstone to the buyer. The commission strikes finding of fact numbers 29 and 30 as listed in the proposal for decision and replaces it with the following. Number 29, in not requiring Respondent Burke to check his email during business hours and immediately prior to a closing, Respondents Halliday and Misko failed to properly supervise Respondent Burke in his duty to the buyer. The commission strikes conclusion of law number 8 as listed in the proposal for decision and replaces it with the following. In number 8, in not forwarding the email he received from Cornerstone to the buyer, Respondent Burke acted negligently and therefore violated Texas Occupations Code 1101.651B1. The commission strikes conclusion of law number 9 as listed in the proposal for decision and replaces it with the following. Number 9, Respondents Halliday and Misko failed to properly supervise Respondent Burke in violation of 22 Texas Administrative Code 535.2A. The commission strikes conclusion of law number 10 as listed in the proposal for decision and replaces it with the following. Number 10, based on the above findings of fact and conclusions of law, disciplinary action should be taken against respondents. The revised sanctions are reasonable and fall within the Commission's schedule of administrative penalties found in 535.991. Additionally, the ALJ's recommendation was not consistent with other sanctions imposed in cases with similar facts and was too lenient to be effective.
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Miller, second by Commissioner Russell. Discussion. No discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just say one last final comment. We are bringing enforcement action against an agent and a broker over policy and procedure. I don't believe that the agent breached fiduciary responsibility. And so we are declaring negligence over not following best practices. And that's where I'm kind of at a loss as to why we're bringing enforcement action over a best practice of not being available by phone or not reading an email on the eve of the closing. And so those are my concerns with respect to this enforcement action. And so therefore, I disagree with the motion, and I'm speaking against it.
Other discussion. Commissioner Wilkinson.
I would just say that we have to remember what we're here for, and that's to protect the consumer. And are we setting a precedent if we allow, I mean, especially, it's just too much for us to say it's okay. Because if we do that here, everyone that's in the industry watches us as to what our leadership brings to the table, and are we keeping our fiduciary responsibility as commissioners to our public? That's my point.
Commissioner Russell.
I think even the best of the real estate community sometimes make mistakes because we're just people trying to do a job. And I think in this instance, even someone is known to have well-educated salespeople that they're responsible for their licenses make mistakes. And this is an instance that I see that a mistake was made and there is a payment for that.
Other discussion. Commissioner Miller.
I'd like to address Commissioner Pena's, I think you called them business practices and best practices, and not being in the real estate business yourself. There are other rules that we work by, like answering our phones, that also we're negligent here. And it's things like every agreement has to be in writing. Now, is that written in law anywhere? I'm not sure, but it's a best business practice. And that's what we have to live by. And if we were in a courtroom, that's what they would say. Usually we have to recommend 3 contractors for anything that we do so that we've all covered our own assets. I'm serious, we preach it all the time. So in this case, because that didn't happen, and there were last-minute negotiations, handshakes evidently, it didn't solve any of the problems that then she filed a complaint for. And we've got to address it and stand up for the consumer.
I will speak in favor of the motion. I think a lot of it rests on the agent, but everything goes back to the broker. The broker did not take responsibility. If the broker would have took responsibility, I think this would be a totally different conversation. I know in the business, I just don't have to answer this, but how many licensees are here at this meeting that check their phone and email during lunch? How many licensees go on vacation and pay for a data package on a cruise so you can check your email? How many of y'all check for a closing statement on Sunday in case you're closing Monday? Y'all, that goes back to the word meticulous. And I hate to make decisions that impact this industry on what some people think are not a significant amount. But it goes back to when we were appointed to this commission, we were appointed to protect the public. And we have a consumer out there that's not protected. My fault, your fault, anybody's fault. They were not protected. They felt like the ball was dropped, and I don't think we get rid of our responsibility to enforce the commission statute. And it very easily says fidelity, integrity, and competence, meticulous, and scrupulous. So I'm speaking in favor of the motion, which, if I'm right, puts us right back where we were 2 years ago. Comments?
I just have a correction to make.
Okay.
Which would be in that, if you all move forward, it would say the commission strikes conclusion of law number 8 as listed in the proposal, and instead of referencing 1101.651, it should have been 1101.652.
Okay. And we have the respondent would like to make a comment?
I have a
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have a quick comment.
Okay.
Unless you've got a specific question.
Okay. We have a comment.
I'm just
Commissioner
trying
Lerner.
I'm just processing through, and I'm having a hard time with some of the facts that weren't given, so to speak, which is kind of weighing in on this. But I'm going back to thinking the broker's responsibility and the agent's responsibility. And many times I see online or get a out of office reply going, all emails sent after whatever hour will not be answered till the next day, or our office hours are blah, blah, blah on Monday through Friday. If you send an email on the weekend, it will not be answered to Monday. So we're almost speaking to that point of, you can't really do that, I guess.
I hear what you say, but I think if you get a response saying it will not be answered till Monday, or you don't take calls after 5, you'll answer the next morning, you're at least setting expectations. And we don't know if those expectations were set. We just know an email was sent, it was not answered, it was not looked at till after closing, and this is brutal, until after they closed and got paid.
6 weeks.
That's when the email was answered or looked at. Any other? Commissioner Woodruff.
Yes, I'm going to speak in favor of the motion. I guess to reiterate, I think it's pretty clear that the agent was actions, although probably well intended, were insufficient to fulfill his fiduciary role with the buyer. I think that had the broker, in the testimony I've seen, taken responsibility, I think that could have, it wouldn't have changed the facts, but it would have made the optics better. I go back to the fact that some of the other comments that as brokers, we are responsible for the actions of our agents, the good ones and the bad ones, meaning the actions. And so, I do think that certainly the agent is the source of it. I think the brokerage, probably was responsible, not because of lack of action or policy as much as just the actions of their agent, but nonetheless responsible. And we're here, as has been said, we're here to protect the public, and of course in these proceedings, send a message, I guess, which is to all of us as brokers that and agents out there that we have to be attentive to our clients, their needs, and be timely. I think that's the situation here, and I have to believe as an agent that when you have a closing the next day, that you're very aware of the importance of that, and that the closing isn't closed until it's closed and funded. And so just to have an agreement, verbal as it were, is just not sufficient. So for those reasons, I speak in favor of the motion.
I totally agree. You mentioned something that you said, broker responsibility. I think a lot of us up here are sponsoring brokers. We have licensees, and I believe a broker owes a fiduciary to their licensee. I think they go to the mat with their licensees. Yet at the same time, I think you also have a responsibility to recognize when you're wrong, and I think that's where we're at here. And so I'm speaking in favor of the motion. Any other discussion? The motion was as read. All in favor? Amber, if you will poll the vote again.
Commissioner Woodruff? Aye. Commissioner Wilkinson? Aye. Commissioner Russell?
Yes.
Commissioner Hartgraves?
Nay.
Commissioner Miller?
Aye.
Commissioner Lerner?
Nay.
Commissioner Pena?
No for the motion.
Chair Kessler?
Yay, yes. Motion passes 8-3. I'm sorry, 5-3, 8 total. Okay, sorry. Okay. All right, we will move
Back to 15A.
to agenda item 15A. SOA docket 329222172, REC Chandra Nunn versus TREC. I would entertain a motion and/or further discussion.
I move to adopt the PFD as written.
I have a motion from Commissioner Russell,
Second.
second from Commissioner Woodruff. Any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? You're abstaining, motion carries. Docket 15B SOA, I'm sorry, Agenda 15B SOA docket number 329220834, REC TREC versus Demetra Ann Rutherford. I would entertain discussion, any questions, or entertain a motion.
I move to adopt the PFD as written.
Have a motion to adopt the PFD as written by Commissioner Lerner.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Miller. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carries. Agenda item 15C, SOA docket number 329222183, REC TREC versus Lionel Amaya. I would entertain discussion, questions for either council or a motion.
Motion to move to adopt the PFD as written, Mr. Chairman.
I have a motion to adopt the PFD as written by Commissioner Pena, seconded by Commissioner Miller. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, agenda item number 17. I believe General Counsel Abby Lee will present agenda item number 17 on the recovery fund.
Good afternoon. Agenda item 17 is discussion and possible action to authorize settlement of recovery fund claims or take other action on TREC number RF 22004 Juan O. Linares versus Amber Pearson, James Wallace Lake Jr., and Revolution Real Estate Services, Inc.
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to authorize a settlement payment of $50,000, the maximum allowable under the law for this case.
Have a motion to adopt as presented. Do I have a second? Got a second. A motion by Commissioner Woodruff, second by Commissioner Wilkinson. Any discussion? I'd just like to note that $50,000 is the maximum allowed currently by the recovery fund. Just FYI, that is the maximum. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carries. We will go to agenda item number 18, again, recovery fund. Go ahead.
Agenda item 18 is the report regarding denial of recovery fund claims as follows. RF 23001, Yolanda I. Garza, Clefero Garza, and Arcelia Alanis Garza versus Augustin J. Garcia, DBA AJ as real estate. This claim was denied because soliciting funds for investment purposes is not conducting real estate brokerage activity. It's not conduct requiring a license, which is a requirement under the Act. You received a copy of the denial letter under separate cover. Does not require any action by the Commission, but I am available to answer any questions, should there be any.
Entertain a motion?
No motion.
I'm sorry. Very good. Okay, we're good.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Let me add, for those that don't know, the recovery fund, we added this part to the meeting probably a year ago where we talk about the denials, because anything that comes in, our staff does a yeoman's job of scrubbing and making sure they meet all the requirements for the recovery fund. So thank you for that. Okay, agenda item 19, rules for possible adoption. And are you also going to do a broker lawyer update at this time?
Yes.
Okay, General Counsel Vanessa Burgess, all yours.
Okay, I'll be up here for a little bit. Gonna give Abby a break. So I'll be covering, in this first one, this will serve as covering agenda item 6, which is the report from the Broker Lawyer Committee. And then I'll also discuss agenda item 19, which is to discussion and possible action to adopt amendments to 22 TAC Chapter 537. The rules and forms are included in your materials. So you should have an incredible amount of information in your materials about these contract form changes. I will cover some of the highlights, of which there are many. So as Chair Kesner mentioned earlier today, the Broker Lawyer Committee met on October 14th for a true marathon of a meeting. They addressed all 123 comments received on the forms as proposed. Some changes were made in response to these comments. And again, I'll just provide a highlight of the committee's discussion. Of note, Texas Realtors submitted comments in agreement with the majority of changes made to the contract forms. However, the association expressed concern regarding proposed changes to language in the addendum for property subject to mandatory membership in a property owners association. I'll address that further or a little bit later in my presentation. Additionally, the association recommended adding a provision to the farm and ranch contract and the unimproved property contract regarding 1031 exchanges. The committee declined to make such a change at this time, but I do believe discussions regarding that will be ongoing. Additionally, the committee discussed at length multiple comments related to the language in paragraph 3, and that's regarding the disclosure of the cash portion of the sales prices from the hard money working group. We received multiple comments as it related to those disclosures and an individual's privacy interests. The committee determined the language as proposed provided the best route to disclosure related to hard money and real estate transaction and ultimately benefited the parties to the transaction. So they did not see a need for change in response to those comments. The committee also discussed the proposed changes to paragraph 6E regarding required notices in response to comments, noting that the changes as proposed were an important step to better call attention to the required notices. The committee, though, will continue to assess possible changes to the contract forms as it relates to the required notices under paragraph 6E, but agreed that the changes as proposed work well. So I think that'll be another ongoing conversation, but ultimately the committee felt that the direction that they had taken was a really good step forward. The committee also discussed the proposed changes to paragraph 11. 16 comments were received. They were all identical in language, and they were against the proposed changes to paragraph 11 based on a concern that agents who were principals to a transaction could not draft language. The committee noted there was an exception to anyone who was a party to the transaction, and that would include license holders who are also principals to draft language. Committee noted this appeared to be an education issue for license holders and not a conflict with statute or rule. In response to multiple comments regarding proposed changes to paragraph 9B5, the committee added language to all contract forms except the farm and ranch and condo contracts, clarifying that transfer fees assessed by property owners associations are governed by the addendum for property subject to mandatory membership in a property owners association. A similar change was made to the condominium contract to clarify that the paragraph does not apply to fees assessed by the association. In response to multiple comments received, the committee also clarified language regarding proration of prepaid items in paragraph 13. Committee made corresponding edits in the addendum for property subject to mandatory membership and a property owners association to clarify that certain specified items are governed by paragraph 13, and discussed the last sentence in the paragraph, which had been proposed by the committee at the request of the Texas Land Title Association, TLTA. Texas Realtors provided written comment, as I mentioned before, regarding the language, that last sentence that was recommended by TLTA, stating that it had the potential to create confusion, and the committee discussed this and determined, decided to strike that language and determined that TLTA's concern regarding third-party collections by Property Owners Association was sufficiently addressed by the amendments to the addendum, so it was not an issue. In response to multiple comments received, the committee added an extra line to paragraph 21 for a second email fax address for each of the parties, as well as lines specifically intended for copies to be sent to the buyer's and seller's agent. Also, in response to multiple comments, the committee inserted the Public Improvement District notice back into the list of addenda or notices that are attached to the contract in paragraph 22. The committee received multiple comments, both solely related to being generally in favor of the proposed changes and being generally against the same proposed changes. So those are comments that say, I love them, I love the changes, or I hate the changes, but without real explanation as to why either way. And so they did consider, we didn't get any that just said I hate them, to be clear. That's my paraphrasing. And so the committee declined to make additional changes in response to the opposing comments and noted that the new changes have overall favorably been received by license holders, real estate associations, and the title industry. The Broker-Lawyer Committee recommends adopting the forms as modified. So the Broker-Lawyer Committee recommendation is to authorize staff on behalf of the Commission to submit for adoption the amendments and new rules in 22 TAC Chapter 537 as presented, along with the forms adopted by reference to the Texas Register, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for adoption. The notice to prospective buyer form, which is TREC Form 570, is a voluntary use form and may be used once posted to the agency's website. All remaining contract forms adopted by reference are available for voluntary use until February 1st, 2023, at which point their use would become mandatory.
All right. Motion?
I would like to make a motion, but before I make a motion, I think that this really speaks highly for the difference in staff and just the people working on those committees. And Summer, all the work that's been done to get the news out that we are listening to you, we want your comments, and goodness did they come in, and that's great. But saying that, I think there's still a lot of comments to be made. And so I would move that the commission repropose the amendments and new rules to 22 TAC Chapter 537 and the forms adopted by reference as prescribed to allow the Broker-Lawyer Committee to further consider public comments and concerns about the form changes. I further move to authorize staff on behalf of the Commission to submit the reproposed amendments and new rules to 22 TAC Chapter 537 and the forms adopted by reference as presented, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for proposal to the Texas Register for publication and public comment.
Second.
We have a motion to repropose them
With the changes as presented.
with changes and have them posted for public comment. We have a motion by Commissioner Wilkinson, second by Commissioner Woodruff. Discussion?
I have a couple issues with some of the changes as well. I think it's opening up some lawsuits, potential lawsuits.
Okay. Our job as commission is we either accept them or we send them back. We don't have, fortunately, we don't have line item veto. Y'all, all these comments were vetted, and we've got forms. They've redone the loan assumption addendum because, y'all, it is coming into our market. They redid the seller financing to make sure they weren't going to be caught up in usury, make sure they understood the escrow principle. They redefined cash in the contract that I deal with every day. They made some changes. I don't think they made anything substantive. I'll speak against the motion because I think our industry needs these form changes. Just the fixture lease addendum, what is conveying, what is not, what's being assumed, what's not being assumed. I think overall they're spot on. There are some maybe things that could be tweaked, but if we go back to repropose them, we propose them now, we come back in February, then they're adopted in May. Anyway, I think the way they stand, it moves them forward. I really do.
Just to clarify, they would be adopted in February.
It'd be adopted in February.
Right, with an effective date that's further out than that, just
April,
to
May.
get everybody ready.
Yeah. I'll speak against the motion, even though I totally understand your concern. But I think all these were vetted. I know Texas Realtors made a comment about the farm and ranch and unimproved. NAR did a study in 2021. 52% of all 1031 exchanges involve residential. So if you go into the 1031, you also need to look at the residential condo and stuff like that. So I'll speak against the motion. Broker, lawyer, y'all, they vetted this. They're comfortable with it, and I'm comfortable adopting them as proposed.
I'm having a real problem with the seller's disclosure being part of these contracts because a buyer's agent is filling out the contract. They're putting in seller information, or it has to go, it's being done by an agent who can mess up very easily. It's not protecting a consumer. It needs to either be on a different form or done somehow differently because it's opening people up to a lawsuit.
But the seller disclosure, TREC has a seller disclosure that meets statute, and then Texas Realtor has one that goes probably a little bit more in depth.
No, I'm talking about where it's included in these contracts that a buyer's agent is filling out.
That is not part of the changes.
So
yes, there's check boxes in there for a buyer's agent to fill out.
And so, okay, so we had anticipated this question, just knowing that Commissioner Lerner had submitted comments, and Abby actually... Abby actually can, we talked about this on Friday, give a little bit of a recap of what that, yeah, only one of those is.
Okay, there we go.
So she can give you a recap of what the issue is and what the discussion points were in the meeting.
Yeah, so Commissioner Lerner, you're correct. There are a couple contract forms that do have that seller's disclosure language incorporated within the form. And so a change initially started with the Farm and Ranch Working Group to tweak that language. So instead of what it currently says, where there is an assumption that the seller has no knowledge of the following defects or conditions, there's check boxes in there. And so there were actually several comments like yours about this concern about the logistics of, the buyer agent is the one, or the buyer is the one submitting the offer, so they're not going to know this information. And so the committee had a couple responses to that. One is that there's already a couple instances, for instance, in the new home contracts where this same process happens, like with the insulation warranty language. There's some check boxes there. And I'm sorry.
That also includes language that you can use separate form or attach the specs. This doesn't.
Yeah, I think it was just to bring up the point that there's already some check boxes that do have to be checked by the seller. And then the other comment that they make is that, if the buyer fills it out and they either leave it blank or they check seller is not aware, then it almost forces the seller to either respond, really look at those things and respond, whereas now, and this again, just the comment that was made, whereas now they were perhaps doubtful isn't the word, but unsure if those conversations were really happening with the seller, because it's just an assumption right now that the seller is not aware of any of the conditions. So those were the responses.
Right. So in time's sake, if you're passing along contracts, you're going to have to go from a buyer's agent to the listing agent, to a seller to figure it out, to a buyer's agent to look at it again, to have it initialed. It really pushes out the whole negotiation process, and it puts a lot of liability if it's filled out wrong. So why wouldn't there just be a separate form if that's what they're wanting? Because then it would be filled out beforehand, and all of this passing back and forth wouldn't have to happen, and it would be protecting consumers, it would be protecting agents, it would be protecting all the parties involved.
They did get that comment, I believe. I think it was just they viewed that as this was a step in the right direction to make this so that it wasn't an assumption that the seller is not aware. But those were the discussions that they had.
So, yeah, I mean, and going back to your insulation statement, it does say in that wording, or with the attached, whatever it may be, document. In my practice, I get the builder, whoever it may be, to give me the specs that I attach and get initialed by all parties. I mean, there just has to be a way that it's going to take. I'm going to be scared to death of that form if I use it. I can tell you that, because I don't know what the seller's thinking.
Commissioner
It's almost like I want all the agents to be scared to death of every contract before they fill it out, so that they will fill it out correctly. And I think very often the buyer's agent has to call the seller's agent for various information, just what to write down in paragraph 21. How do they fill that out? So I think if we can get something started with these contracts, so I'm speaking against the motion, they will have to understand. They have to promote communication and make that communication ahead of writing the offer rather than after they've already written it.
What if they put it in there wrong?
They can amend it.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I know the attorneys will. By statute, I do not have to give a seller disclosure if it's land, unimproved, or farm and ranch. If the property value is less than 5% of the total price, it is excluded from a seller disclosure. The old contract just said, except as otherwise disclosed, the seller has no knowledge of the following, and it was just an affirmative, I have no knowledge. This is saying, the buyer is saying, the seller is not. And this makes the listing agent go back and look, saying, at least there's a checkbox there to go back and look, instead of the seller just presuming there is none of this. This is making the seller confirm. They say you don't know any of this, and the seller's having to sign off on it. That's what I like about the change, because they're not even required to give a disclosure on these properties. But this is at least saying you don't know of any flooding, threatened litigation, environmental hazards. At least it's an affirmative where the seller has to go back and confirm, yes, I did sign, I do not know that knowledge. And I think that's why they added it. That's why I like it there. At least it's an affirmative, what they know and don't know, instead of just a presumption that they don't know anything. And I think that's why they added it just on those forms that don't require seller disclosure. But I mean, anyway, I like the forms, but we will certainly entertain discussion.
Just a question. How many, believe me, I think the broker lawyer committee, obviously with the time they're putting in and the people that serve on there, they're the best. But I also think that they like that's what they do. They like the idea that they're looking at the entire package. And what's the time difference if we did send it out? And I want them to know that we are very complimentary of the work they're doing, because they are doing a great job. Thank goodness for them. That's where we go. That's where we get our legal contracts. So what's time difference that if say we send it back to them?
So if you send back to repropose, and assuming everything goes, you would be looking at an adoption in February. And we, like I said, you usually kind of stretch out your effect. Am I saying this wrong?
Yeah, so if we repropose today, then we could adopt in February.
But then I will say this, so then you want to stretch out your effective date, right? just to give folks time to get the forms up in their files, to educate, et cetera.
Could we do that?
So that's why I mentioned a February 1st
Yeah.
mandatory date. So you always build that window in. And so I'll add, there's a little bit of a caveat here because you're going to hit legislative session, and pending any changes that come with that, it may, you just really need to look at it. It may be that you want to wait until you've got legislative changes into the contract, and then you're a year down the road.
Okay, gotcha.
And that's okay. I mean, I think everybody is of the intent of like, let's get it right. But legislative session throws in like a little bit of a timing wrinkle.
Good point.
So if we re-propose, so you're saying what we re-propose today goes back to broker lawyer and then comes back to us, right?
Going to go out for public comment.
And public comment takes how long?
It'll post, you have 30 days for public comment consideration, and then we'll present it at the next meeting.
So would there be a case in which we could have a Zoom emergency meeting or something that could?
It wouldn't be you wouldn't do an emergency meeting
Right.
for this. You could certainly call another meeting to the extent you wanted to, but honestly, by the time you get, it seems like a long window, but it's not, because you're gonna have holidays. Then the
Right.
broker lawyer committee's gotta meet to review all those comments. That, I think that's slated, if they have it January 15th, you're already pretty close to your February 14th meeting, so.
I just hate to rush things when they're not perfected, because these changes will last for a long time. So taking the time to get it right, to me, is more important than waiting to get them, just changed again.
So,
Go ahead.
no, I think I'm speaking against it, although I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a question. What is it that we imagine we're going to, I mean, we've had a lot of comments, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pro and con. What is it we imagine we're going to get in another 90 days? And I ask that because in my experience, I mean, we're never going to get it, quote, right, because it's a living thing that continues to change over time as practice change, et cetera, needs change. So what is it that we would expect the outcome of waiting 90 days would yield to us?
So I think what you would see, if you did this, it would be a re-proposal with the changes that the broker lawyer committee recommended out of this last meeting. And so it would be the opportunity for comment on those changes and any of the, already existing changes. But any of the, I'm going to call it tinkering that they did in this last meeting, that would be put out for public comment. Because they did make some changes in response to what was originally posted to the register. So it does look different. It doesn't look tremendously different. So you would be looking for comments on that. You could potentially catch folks who hadn't commented before or who watched the meeting and now want to have a response to some of the comments that were made during that meeting. Similar to what, Commissioner Lerner just did. She submitted comments. She watched, she sounds like she's got some stuff she wants to engage in. So you could potentially catch that. The counter to that is they did meet. They did have these conversations about these particular comments, and they made the determination, you know what, the public interest of making these changes outweighs that, or they were able to, outweighs making this change right now. I'm thinking of some of the line discussions that they had in 6E and what should go where. They really walked through that process, and was it worth doing it? Was this the right direction to take now? As far as some of those other comments, I think they will have the same conversation they did, because they ultimately reached the conclusion of, no, we think that this is better. We had the comment, we responded to it. And that doesn't mean, I'll say this, like, I'm not saying that issue, it sounds like it's not resolved for you, Commissioner Lerner. I bet it's not for the other folks who submitted those comments. I'm just saying what you're likely to see in a broker lawyer committee meeting is, oh, well, we discussed this and we saw this, unless there's new,
Well, your point, I had not even thought about the legislative session and what happens with the time zone there. So convincing arguments here, because I think that they do a good job. I just don't want, I guess my concern is confusion among our agents, and that was my main concern. But and getting enough, getting more input. But I will be happy to withdraw my motion if you would withdraw your second.
Is Robert here?
If you would like to.
Roberta.
I think we have to vote it down.
Do we have to? Okay.
I just want to add to what Commissioner Woodruff said and Commissioner Lerner. Broker lawyer, they have a punch list of things they're going to look at on the next revision. Well, they looked at if we come out in February, we adopt in April or May, then the legislature comes out something mandatory in September, and we're changing again and there's some tweaking that needs to be done to forms, and they have a punch list, and they have certainly entertained a lot of motion. So, I guess, go ahead.
Well, I could speak to one concern that Commissioner Wilkinson brought up that I think is something we can do a really good job with. Is in the interim, if you decide to adopt today, even if you decide to repropose and adopt later, we would commit to exactly what I'm about to say, which is the commission likes to do a little bit of an educational campaign, right? I mean, we try, and I think we are well equipped to do it, with Summer here, to get the news out, to be out there talking. I think I've got 3 things in the next 3 weeks to talk about these contract form changes, and if they don't go, then I'll talk about them in a little bit of a different way. But I think as a commission, you're able to get out there, we're able to get out there in a way that I don't think we did before. And so we can, since we have that prolonged mandatory date of February 1, we can get that message out on, hey, is this confusing to you? Like, let us know, and we can, adjust. We can do podcasts and all of the things. So I think there's room for that too. I know that, you had a lot of concerns about the confusion and the number of comments.
Right.
So hopefully we can't address it all, but I think we could probably make some headway in that. Either way, either version, repropose or not.
Yeah.
I have one more contract question, and I may have missed it in the broker lawyer committee meeting. Where they put those notices, the MUD notices and everything that you had to list in there, why did they decide that couldn't be in paragraph 22?
It's back in 2020.
So the discussion was that paragraph 22 is for really intended to be addenda, and this section was really specific to title notices. So although they did keep the addendum, the PID addendum in paragraph 22 after comments received, the thought is that this is really sort of a separate notice that could be provided before execution of the contract, could be attached, but that these are really kind of separate notices, and so they were. The thought was that they fit better in that particular paragraph.
Okay, we had a motion to repropose. The motion was not withdrawn, so we need to vote on that. All in favor of sending this back to broker lawyer and not adopting today, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion fails. I would entertain another motion.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt, looking for the right words. Yes, staff recommendation. Yes.
I have a motion to adopt.
Second.
Yes, sir.
I have a second. Motion made by Commissioner Woodruff, second by Commissioner Russell. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All abstaining? Motion carries. All right. Thank you. I have no idea where we're at.
Oh, it's still me. I'll be
Okay, still you.
regretting my shoe choice. Agenda item 20 is discussion and possible action to propose amendments to 22 TAC 535.223 Standard Inspection Report Form. And I talked a little bit about this earlier today in my Inspector Committee report. So the proposed amendments to 535.223 clarify that when multiple boxes are checked for a particular item on the report form, the inspector must also explain the reason for checking multiple boxes. The proposed amendments also remove single system inspections from the list of exemptions, meaning the requirements in 535.223 would apply to those inspections. The Texas Real Estate Inspector Committee recommends the proposed amendments. Staff recommendation is to authorize staff on behalf of the Commission to submit the proposed amendments to 535.223 Standard Inspection Report Form as presented, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for proposal to the Texas Register for publication and public comment.
I move that the commission approve staff's recommendation.
have a motion by Commissioner Miller,
Second.
second Commissioner Woodruff. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carries.
Okay, agenda item 21. This is also a little bit of a longer one. Discussion and possible action to propose amendments to 22 TAC, Chapter 537 as follows. We've got changes to 537.1 definitions. Yes, okay. The proposed new rule adds a definition section for ease of reading and for consistency with other commission rule changes. And so the addition of this section also includes a definition for the new term informational items, which is intended to better describe the type of information that a license holder can add to a contract form. The proposed amendments to 537.11 reorganize and consolidate the rule for clarity and simplify the language regarding when a license holder is required to use a commission-approved contract form and what is considered the unauthorized practice of law. So specifically, the proposed changes in subsection A align the rule language more closely with the applicable statutory language and simplify the list of exceptions related to contract form use by license holders. Importantly, the exception found in subsection A4 is amended to eliminate the ability of license holders to use contract forms prepared by an attorney for a brokerage when no commission-approved contract form for mandatory use exists. Subsections B through D provide further guidance to license holders and members of the public on what the commission considers to be the unauthorized practice of law. And so of note, subsection D2 provides that it is not the practice of law to add language to or strike language from a contract form if specifically instructed in writing by a principal, as long as any change is made conspicuous, including underlining additions, striking through deletions, or employing some other method which clearly indicates the change is being made. Finally, the proposed changes to subsection H update the language regarding reproduction of commission-approved contract forms to better account for changes in technology. The Unauthorized Practice of Law Working Group recommends the proposed amendments. The staff recommendation is to authorize staff on behalf of the Commission to submit the proposed new rule and amendments to 22 TAC Chapter 537 as presented, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for proposal, to the Texas Register for publication and public comment.
I move that the commission approve staff's recommendation.
Motion made by Commissioner Miller. Second by Commissioner Hargraves. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carries. Agenda item number 22.
Agenda item number 22, discussion and possible action to conclude the review of 22 TAC Chapter 535 General Provisions. After review of this chapter as part of quadrennial rule review, staff has determined that the reason justification for adopting the rules within these chapters continues to exist. Of note, 2 comments were received regarding the Commission's notice of review. One expressed concern about commission rebates to consumers, and the other requested rule changes related to advertising to require license holders to have a specific voicemail greeting. Staff recommends making no additional changes to the rule text based on the comments received. And so the staff recommendation is to authorize staff on behalf of the Commission to close the review of 22 TAC Chapter 535 as presented.
Entertain a motion.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Motion made by Commissioner Pena.
Second.
Second, Mr. Woodruff. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carries. Thank you. We will skip agenda item number 23 because we've already done it. We will go to agenda item number 24. And that is discussion and possible action to nominate candidates for offices of Vice Chair and Secretary of the Commission. Commission policy, you can show an interest. We don't necessarily nominate today. There's really no campaigning because we have this little walking quorum thing. There is a possibility that reappointments will not be made, and we might have the same people, serving in February. But we will decide that in February. So if you have an interest or whatever, let us know. But that will be voted in on February. It's actually statute or policy that we actually announce it now, even though no action can be taken.
Well, Mr. Chairman, since we may not be here, I'd sure like to make a couple of comments. And hopefully, I think Commissioner Miller has done a phenomenal job as vice chair. And so I hope to goodness that we get to see her stay on. But in the future, I would just like to see, if they want to do it, Commissioner Woodruff and Commissioner Pena. I'd love to see them on the exec committee, and that's my comment if they have any interest. And the reason I bring up those two, I've watched Mr. Woodruff for years, and I know his leadership is really outstanding. Mr. Pena brings so much to the table, I think, from his experience not only with his intelligence in the CPA world, but also in agency world. So you know, those are, and we've got great people here on the commission. So I just wanted to make those comments about those two, if they have an interest.
And again, we might be the same place we are, which would be fine. All right. Agenda item number 25, possible action regarding topics for the February workshop. You know, topics always seem to come up. We never have a shortage of topics we need to talk about. I think a lot of them is like a living document. It's what's happened between now and then. We will certainly entertain any ideas you have. I know tomorrow we're going to talk about several things. I know we're going to do a couple task forces, working groups. Broker responsibility is going to take some lead on associated broker issues and stuff like that. But if you think it's something you want to throw in the February workshop, we can certainly pencil it in. The market will dictate whether or not it's there. But other ideas, you know, we have transaction coordinators we're going to talk about, expansion teams we're going to talk about, associate brokers we're going to talk about, you know, just a lot of things. So anything else you think we might be interesting for the workshop, we will certainly entertain that. Okay. Okay. Agenda item 26, possible action to approve new inspector termination form. We kind of had a preview of this earlier. Agenda item number 26, I have no idea what page it's on.
Neither do I.
It's got to be like
63.
561.
561.
I can't tell if this is on. Yeah.
Okay.
Denise Sample, Director of Licensing. This is the discussion and possible action to approve new inspector termination form. And this form was created upon the recommendation of the Inspector Committee after several questions and conversations from licensed professional inspectors wanting to formally terminate sponsorship of apprentice or real estate inspectors. The discussions brought to light the need for a dedicated form. An added benefit of this form is that we collect all the pertinent data on one page for the efficient processing of those requests. So staff's recommendation is to move on behalf of the commission to approve the new inspector termination form.
Entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
A motion made by Commissioner Woodruff, second by Commissioner Lerner. Any discussion? Yeah, I think this is a great form. I really do. I'm really surprised they didn't have something like that before. But all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Agenda item 27, future agenda items. Again, anything you think we need to talk about, we'll certainly put it on the agenda. 28 is scheduled future meetings. The next date is February the 13th. And then we will have our workshop on Valentine's Day. What better way to spend your Valentine's than at a TREC workshop, you know? Yeah, the last two, it's actually been on Valentine's. Yeah. Yeah. So, but we're going to talk about dates tomorrow and kind of get them worked out. I'm probably putting the cart before the horse, but anyway, we'll talk about dates tomorrow. But look at the calendar. Me and Commissioner Hartgraves, so, you know, we need to look and make sure that we're not scheduling something on Election Day or Mother's Day or something like that. So we're going to kind of scrub the calendar. I've got a harebrained idea about some different things we'll talk about at the workshop tomorrow as far as dates and stuff. So y'all keep that in mind. General Counsel Burgess.
February is
It's set. Yeah, February is set.
because it corresponds to
Right. And if you're a licensee, you can attend and get CE credit for the February meeting. All right, before we adjourn, it might be the last time Commissioner Wilkinson and Commissioner Miller are here. When I came into this 4 years ago, I had no idea how much excitement and fun it would be. We might not get everything right as a commission, but I tell you what, I can remember a whole lot more votes 6-3, 5-4, 7-2 than I can 9-0. And someone said, well, is that good? I said, that's healthy. When you can have discussion and you can vet and you can vote and you can leave as a commission, there's not a better position to be in than chairman of a commission like y'all. And I just want to thank you for your service, and you for your service, and Commissioner Williams for his, because this agency is a totally different agency than it was 4 years ago, and it's a totally different agency than it was 2 years ago. And you two right there are a big, big part of it. And whether you're sitting here or sitting there, we hope you're not a stranger and you're always back to see us, because we value your input, we value your commitment to our industry. And I just wanted to say that before we adjourned.
Well, can I just say, it's been an honor to serve with you, Mr. Chairman, and it's been an honor to serve, and what a wonderful, wonderful staff we have. It's been long, it really has been long. In some ways, it seems like yesterday, but in many ways, it seems like a long journey from 2017. That's, I think, when we came in, or January or February of 18. So it's been a long journey, but it's been a good one, and it's been all uphill, which is great. And we've got the commissioners now to keep it going. So good luck to all of you. Good luck to the staff.
I second everything that she said. It's been a fun ride. And man, have I learned a whole lot and have so much more respect for everything that TREC does. And they were doing it before, but y'all are doing it so much better. And thank you. Thank you for the 230,000 licensees that you all are over, because they need you here.
I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Let's go.
Motion made, second? Second made. All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned at 3:09 p.m. Central Time.